G'day mates, it's B-Buster here. I hope you all had a really nice Christmas and New Year's. So, do you enjoy videos that help you get to sleep and de-stress? Do you like relaxing to a cozy video game? Or do you just appreciate the sound of my voice in the background? Well, if you do, then you might be interested to know that I've started a new series on a new channel where I gently ramble as I play some video games with some gentle music and rain ambience in the background. I'll leave a link down in the description and the comments for those who might be interested in some more sleep content like this. I do hope to see you guys there and that you really enjoy the content over there. And without further ado, let's begin. It all started in 2010. My then husband, Jay, myself and our 2 kids, ages 3 and 8 months, went to stay with his grandparents for some time. The house is on the bigger side, neatly kept, and was built in the 70s. We were due to stay for a month while we awaited moving to Japan, where Jay was getting stationed. His grandparents, although accommodating, could be very cold and critical at times. Keep that in mind. Now, my situation before going there, family troubles and alcoholism. I won't go into detail, but my parents were going through turmoil that I couldn't help with. It tore me apart and I was coping with drinking. So, Jay and I set ourselves up in his childhood bedroom on the 2nd floor, along with our 8-month-old daughter. Our son was set up in the room right next to ours. Our room was where most of the activity will take place too. A few nights into our stay, I have a sort of dream of just a sound. It's the sound of a plate spinning on a hard surface until it finally comes to a stop. My eyes shot open and I look around the carpeted room, realizing that nothing in the room could make that sound. Thinking that it was just a weird dream, I turn over to see Jay, staring wide-eyed back at me. I whispered, "Did you hear that too?" And he replied, "Yes." We both went on to describe the same dream. Strange, but not scary yet. We told his grandparents about it the next morning. His grandpa said, "It's probably an animal outside just making noise." But we both knew that it wasn't. Later, when we were alone, Jay tells me about a similar situation that happened when he was a kid. He was in that room reading a book on his bed, when suddenly he heard what sounded like a big dog scratching from inside the closet door, trying to get out. He ran, obviously terrified, downstairs to his grandpa, who went back up to check the closet. Nothing was there, and he told Jay that it was probably some squirrels on the roof. That story definitely gave me chills, though. Well, a couple of nights later, Jay and I are sleeping soundly. We are awoken by the king bed shaking violently. We sit up for about 5 seconds, and then it just stops. We don't know what to think about that. Nothing else in the room moved, including the tall bookshelf with a basketball, books, and other knickknacks on it. Jay goes back to sleep, but I'm wide awake wondering what the heck happened. We don't mention this to his grandparents, but while all of this is weird stuff and it's all happening, there's other things taking place during the day that are not paranormal but still troubling. Like, my 3-year-old son is hyperactive. Jay's grandparents criticize my parenting with snide comments. I tried my best to please them as a guest in their home, but somehow I just always fell short. I start to feel insecure and small, like I can't do anything right. Jay doesn't stick up for me, which makes me feel even worse. This is the point where I start feeling like something is around me, though. What I mean is that in certain parts of the house I felt fine, but as soon as I would walk towards the back of the house where the staircase to go upstairs was, I would feel like a change in the energy. It felt like something just gravitated towards me like a magnet. It would come right up on my back as I ascended the stairs, and when I got to the top of the stairs and went to our bedroom, I began to notice a a heavy, dreadful feeling. This feeling plagued me from then on to the point where I had to talk to myself to go upstairs. Also, when I would shower, I felt like something was standing outside of the shower curtain. I could, sense its presence so strongly, like it could see me through the curtain. And needless to say, I made my showers pretty quick. Well, as a few weeks passed, the feelings of dread turned into a nagging feeling like something really bad was going to happen. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was a feeling in the pit of my stomach that I couldn't shake. Every night when I would close my eyes to sleep, it felt like something was leaning over inches away from my face, but I would open my eyes to see nothing. This happened so much that I had to cover my face with a comforter to create a barrier between me and whatever this was. I could never see this presence, I could only feel it though. At one point I almost wished it would show itself to me so that I could know that I wasn't going crazy, but deep down I knew that I really didn't want to see it. We had only a few days left to stay there, but then there was some bad news. Jay's command told him that they had changed the date for his arrival to Japan. We had to stay longer with his grandparents, about 2 more weeks. I was devastated, but tried my best not to show it. And it was during this time that the attack happened to me. On this night, the kids were already in bed. All of us adults were downstairs watching TV. Jay's grandpa began to talk to us about my son and how we handled him. Jay's grandpa turns to me and says, "When I watch you interact with your son, it reminds me of 2 drunks arguing at a bar." I felt the tears rise up and I had to excuse myself to bed. As soon as I got up in bed, I started to cry my eyes out. Jay comes up about 20 minutes later and I tell him that he should have said something to stand up for me. I'm doing the best that I can, and he says that he will say something in the morning, and he falls asleep. I felt helpless. I remember what happened next, though, as clear as day, still 14 years later. You see, I looked up at the ceiling fan, and in an instant it felt like my entire body jolted with a vibrating electricity. It took my breath away, and I was frozen in a panicked state. I reached over and grabbed Jay's arm in an attempt to wake him, and I remember saying, "Something's happening to me," but he just didn't wake up. Then I felt thoughts trickling into my head that were not my own. It honestly felt like this entity was telepathically communicating with me using those horrendous thoughts. This evil thing was trying to compel me to do something horrible. I don't want to even say what it was, but I remember gritting my teeth and having a psychological battle with this thing, saying in my head, "No, no, no," and then it was just so strange, but I decided to combat the thought with a positive thought. I pushed the thought out by thinking of a beautiful, bright, sunny sky, and I also thought of God. Within seconds, I was released from this entity's grasp, and I suddenly felt normal again. Weirdly too, I just remember passing out, and I didn't wake up until the early afternoon the next day. But when I woke up, I had this intense full-body pain. Pain so bad that I started sobbing instantly. The tops of my feet, my hands, and my kneecaps felt bruised. I felt like I'd been beaten by a group of people. My entire body was pulsating with pain. I compare it to smashing your thumb with a hammer, that sort of pulsating feeling afterward. I felt that throughout my whole body. Well, after taking some Tylenol and drinking water, I was still in pain and I couldn't breathe properly. My fingers and arms started to seize up from a lack of oxygen, and they took me to the emergency room. After putting me on an IV, doctors took blood work and told me that I had nothing wrong with me. No sickness. I didn't dare tell them what I went through because I knew that they'd put me in a psych ward if I said anything. In fact, I didn't tell anyone. But I knew what happened though. I was oppressed and attacked by something unseen and evil. I don't know if it tried to possess me or what, but it sure felt like it tried and failed. But the result of whatever this was horrendous pain. Well, fast forward to a few years later. My mother was dying from an early onset of Alzheimer's, and Jay's grandparents asked me to come and stay with them for a few days. Honestly, too, I wanted to face this thing again now that I had renewed faith, and had also researched how to combat demonic or evil spirits. Me, my son, and my now 3-year-old daughter go to the house, and I decide to sleep alone in that room and set them up in the other 2 guest rooms. I walk into the room and set my stuff down, and I look around. I closed my eyes and said in my head, "You will not affect me. I have Christ on my side, and he will protect me." I went to bed that night and woke up the next morning with no issues. I go into my daughter's room to help her get dressed for breakfast, and she says, "Mum, there was a man by my window last night, and he was talking to me." My heart sank, and my body instantly went cold. I remained calm, though, and I said, "Oh, really? What did he say?" She replied, "He said that he hates you." I replied, "Well, I hate him too." And I changed the subject and ignored the energy around us. I haven't been back to that house in more than 10 years since Jay and I divorced, but my kids still go there occasionally to see their great-grandpa. My kids know to pray and guard themselves, and Jay, who I did eventually tell my story to, said that he would be on guard as well. My oldest daughter, the same one who saw the man standing at her window years ago, has had some experiences as well. Like one night she had a dream that she was stabbing someone with a knife and they grabbed it from her and cut her face. She woke up feeling like blood was trickling down her face, but obviously there was no cut. Another time, she was up reading a book late at night in her room when she heard someone knock on the bedroom door. She was still for a moment and didn't respond, but then she heard her great-grandpa's voice say, "Let me in." She slowly got up and opened the door to a pitch-black hallway because there was no one there. Jay's grandma has since died, and now Jay's grandpa is sick with stage 4 lung cancer. He's an atheist, and he can be quite cruel at times. I have often wondered, though, if there's something attached to him, or if he invited this entity in. Originally, I thought it was Jay's estranged father who invited this evil into the house. His estranged father was disturbed. He was obsessed with dark things, and on the odd time that we did see him, I felt uncomfortable around him. He's dead now too, though. When Jay's grandpa dies, which may be soon, Jay is going to inherit this house, and I worry that he will not sell it and that him and potentially our kids will be fair game for this entity. I've thought about reaching out to Jay's grandpa and telling him what happened all those years ago, but I don't know. What do you guys think? What would you do? I don't mind jokes, but please do give me some serious thoughts and help if you can. I know that this is a bit of a long story, but if you've made it this far, then thanks for listening. It was a cold, dark day in November. I was 11 years old and spending the night at my step-cousin's house. I absolutely loved hanging out with her. We always had so much fun together. This was supposed to be another normal day. My step-cousin, her name's Katie, was 12 at the time and home alone when I arrived with my backpack. I was excited as we talked and planned fun activities for the next day. A bit of backstory about Katie. Her father had passed away a few years earlier due to alcohol poisoning in her bedroom, that same bedroom that we were supposed to sleep in that night. At the time, I didn't know that he had died in her room. All I'd heard was that it happened somewhere in the house. Her mother was extremely private and never shared details about his death. In fact, she almost never talked about him. Katie was devastated for years, and honestly, who wouldn't be, right? Something like that changes a person. I never knew what her father looked like because my uncle had just married her mum that year, and by that point I'd known Katie for about 3 years. Anyway, so I had just arrived at her house, and after a while, Katie mentioned that she needed to take a quick shower. I didn't think much of it, and I told her that I would wait in her bedroom. She headed to the bathroom, locked the door, and turned the water on. I was sitting on her bed when, out of nowhere, I heard a knock. It came from her closet, though. A loud, deliberate knock. I froze for a second, unsure if I just imagined it, but then it happened again, louder this time. My heart started racing as I stood up and slowly walked closer to the closet, but the closer I got, the louder the knocking became. And then, standing face to face with the closet door, I felt it. This overwhelming sense of darkness, like the air itself had turned heavy and suffocating. It was terrifying, and I couldn't move. The knocking suddenly stopped, but before I could catch my breath, I heard the TV in the living room turning on and off by itself. The house was pitch black except for the light in the hallway. I don't know why, but that made everything feel even more unsettling. My fight or flight instincts kicked in, and I ran out of her bedroom, through the kitchen, and into the hallway. When I stopped running, I realized the TV was off again, and the living room was now completely silent. I could still hear Katie showering in the bathroom, completely oblivious to what was happening. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring into the pitch-black living room. Suddenly, the TV turned on again, its flickering light cutting through the darkness. And that was when I saw it. The reflection of her father's face appeared on her baby picture, hanging on the wall across from the TV. He looked confused, almost like he didn't understand how he was there. Then he saw me. Our eyes locked. His eyes were pitch black, completely void of life or emotion. I felt an icy chill shoot through me as we stared at each other. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like forever. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, the TV turned off and he was gone. I was left standing in the hallway, shaking uncontrollably. My eyes were fixed on her baby picture, which now looked completely normal again. But then, in the corner of the room, I saw him. A man in a black leather jacket, standing next to the TV. His back was turned to me. He didn't move. He was just standing there quietly. I let out a quiet gasp and he heard it, and slowly he began to turn around. I started backing away and he started walking toward me. His eyes were pitch black and he had this twisted, evil grin on his face. His footsteps, they echoed through the house, heavy and deliberate, like he was a real person. I couldn't look away, and he kept smiling, kept staring at me with those black eyes, and I just kept backing up until I reached the bathroom door. I turned around and pounded on the door with all my strength, too terrified to say a word. Katie opened it, shocked at the sight of me. I was shaking so badly I could barely speak, but eventually I managed to choke out, "Your dad is outside." What shocked me even more was her reaction, though. She wasn't surprised. Terrified, yes, but not surprised. She told me that her mum saw him sometimes too. We stayed locked in the bathroom until her mother got home. When we told her what had happened, she believed me without any hesitation. She even admitted that she had seen him a few nights earlier, smoking a cigarette on the balcony apparently. She pulled out an old photo album and flipped a few pictures to him, and I immediately froze because it was 100% him, the man that I'd seen. The leather jacket, the short brown hair, the same evil, soulless grin. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. I could feel the evil radiating from him when he came at me. He didn't want me there, and I wasn't welcome in this home. I will never forget that night as long as I live, and even now, many years later, talking about it still makes my skin crawl. So it's time to take a break from the doom scrolling and treat yourself to some me time instead. Dipsy's spicy, bite-sized stories get you right to the good part, so you can escape into a captivating romance whenever you need a break. Whether you're commuting, relaxing, or just need to unwind, Dipsy is the perfect escape from the daily grind. Dipsy is the female-founded app for spicy audiobooks and more. Created by women for the female gaze, their app has over 1,000 spicy audiobooks, all crafted by a team of professional writers and top-tier narrators. And if you're anything like me and a bit of an insomniac, I personally found their section for sleep really nice. I really loved their section with ambient sounds like winter rain, and I actually ended up falling asleep to one that night, which was really nice. And with their easy-to-explore app, you can search for your favorite romance genres like contemporary, historical, dark, sports, western, romantasy, and more. New chapters are released every week, so you'll always find something new to enjoy. So, for listeners of the show, Dipsy is offering an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipsystories.com/scared. That's 30 days of full access for free when you go to dipseastories.com/scared. dipsystories.com/scared. So I live alone in a small college town, although I'm not a student or a faculty member or anything. My apartment is in a duplex on a residential street, just a few blocks from campus, of which most of the students have left for their winter break. Things get very quiet when they're not around, and late Wednesday night I woke up to a disturbing sound outside. It was somebody crying, but not in a normal way. This was more like a delirious wailing. The person didn't sound grief-stricken or panicked, and there were no cries for help or anything. Otherwise, I probably would have gone outside, cautiously, to check things out. This sounded more like somebody doing an impression of a ghost, but being a little bit too convincing. It certainly wasn't a pleasant way to wake up, and I got up and looked out the window, but I didn't see anyone. I couldn't tell where the sound was coming from, but after a few minutes the wailing grew distant, and things got quiet again. So I went back to sleep, a little bit unsettled. Well, Thursday night rolls around and I went to bed as usual, wondering if I would hear anything again. And sure enough, I was awakened a few hours later, but this time the sound was completely different. At first, I wondered if there had been a heavy snowfall because I heard what sounded like the edge of a shovel scraping the sidewalk. It was very rhythmic, two plodding footsteps followed by a long and drawn-out scraping. There were thuds and scraping, and I got up and looked out of the window where I saw no snow but a dense fog and a woman across the street. It took me a minute to tell if she was wearing some strange hat or not, but then I realized that the hat was her hair. It was long, down to her waist, and completely filthy and matted, bunched up in a single mass that looked like a gigantic glistening hairball. The woman was standing with her shoulders hunched forward and her arms crossed behind her back, like a figure skater or maybe a dancer. She was doing an unusual sort of dance as well, where she would take two heavy stomps and then glide as if she were on ice skates, but there was no ice. I couldn't tell how she was gliding so gracefully as well, and effortlessly across the pavement like that. It was almost hypnotic to watch, because she appeared to be elderly and frail, but she could spin, glide, and maintain balance on a level that would be hard for me to keep up with. Each time she would glide, I'd hear the scrape sound of her shoe against the pavement. There were no additional steps to the dance, just the rhythmic stomping and gliding, headed in one direction, before twirling around and doing the same steps in the other. After a few minutes of this, she stopped and then stooped down like a runner at the starting line, dramatically leaned forward with her fingertips lightly touching the ground. She stayed that way for a good minute or two, and it was a very unsettling thing to see in the shadows and the fog. Then she slowly stood up, turning, facing away from me, and got up on her very tippy toes, and with her long skinny arms outstretched, she broke into that rapid sort of tiptoeing motion that professional ballerinas do. In my mind, I heard that classic cartoon sound effect that plays when a character scampers away, and without a sound, she danced into the fog, and after that, I haven't seen or heard anything from her since then. So this started about 2 to 3 months ago. I work in an art store and I do a little bit of everything, helping customers, cleaning, stocking shelves, etc. And one day this guy comes in asking for some help, as he never really took up art before, and luckily I was chosen to help that guy. We talk for a bit and I ask what he wants to learn, what medium he wants to use and such. He said that he's into sketching at the moment and wants to expand his horizons. I say, cool, I can give you a few directions and blah blah blah. And somehow it comes up that I'm also an artist, and he gets really interested and asks me if I can help him with art, which caught me off guard because that's a bit weird. I said that I'm not a professional and I'm not interested in teaching, and he took that well and off he went. Well, next week he returns again and specifically asks for me, and said that he brought his sketchbook this time, which I found a bit odd since I don't remember agreeing to help. He shows me some of his sketches, and I notice that he only draws K-pop singers, and I realize one of them is a member of BTS. I don't listen to them, but he pointed it out. He starts raving about BTS and K-pop and the like, which I'm like, okay. Apparently, though, I hit a sweet spot for him because nobody likes K-pop and I know of it. Anyway, he starts coming in now every few days and I'm really disturbed by him. I also found out that he learned when my work schedules are and when my birthday is, my name, how old I am, etc. I only found this out because of a few encounters with said customer, and well, one day I clock into work and I see him waiting in the stairs for me, and he acts all surprised like, whoa, didn't know you were coming in so early. I could tell he was lying because he was sweating really badly and couldn't look me in the face. And for whatever reason, this whole situation just really creeped me out. On my birthday, he came up to me at the exact time I'm supposed to start my shift and gave me a gift, and a note as well. He drew me a member of a band that I like and gave me a birthday card, and told me that he wanted to bring me something a day before my birthday because he knew that I wouldn't come in the day of. Mind you, I never told him my birthday. He must have overheard me talking about it to my coworkers or something. I had insane amounts of anxiety and I had to muster up the courage to act like I wasn't completely off-put by this guy. After he walked away, I looked at the note that he had wrote to me, which said, "Happy 20th birthday. Keep making people happy and being so kind. P.S. I'm not a paper thief, so you can have this back." Paper thief? And then I realized that the paper note was written on a piece of garbage that I must have thrown away months ago, which means that he had picked it up out of the trash to return it to me. That was a little bit too weird for me, and made my blood run a bit cold. He came in eventually and asked for some help like usual when he brought up buying something for kids, and because I wanted to know if maybe there's a wife or something involved, I asked, "Oh, how old are your kids?" Obviously, I also need to know to give him age-appropriate supplies, but he started freaking out and saying that they aren't my kids, I don't have kids, and I'm not married, and started asking me if I was married. I said that I wasn't married, but I am in a committed relationship and have been for 5 years. It was a lie, but he got very disappointed by that, and just instantly walked off. Honestly, I was kind of happy about that as well, and I thought, well, maybe that was it. He didn't come in for 2 weeks, and honestly, I was pretty overjoyed, up until today, that is, because today, he came up to me during work while I was busy and asked for help. He also asked where I was for 2 weeks, which really confused me, but also disturbed me a bit. I tried my best not to interact with him, and told my coworker to take over for me while I go hide in the back. She agrees and keeps him busy, and then he ends up leaving. After he left, she called me over and said that I could come out, and I asked, did he ask anything about me? And she looked at me with a concerned look and said, yeah, he did. He asked why you're so busy suddenly and when you'll come out, and if you're at work tomorrow and the like. Now I'm riddled with anxiety, and it's making me feel really anxious at work because, quite honestly, I'm pretty afraid to see him. Thankfully, he hasn't done anything physical, but it's putting a lot of mental strain on me, and I don't want to quit because I love my job and my coworkers. Also, it's pretty important to mention, but after the birthday incident, the moment that he left, I went up to management and told them everything about him, and that he creeps me out and I feel pretty unsafe. My manager said, it's totally legitimate to go after a girl you like. That's what men would do back in the day. You should feel flattered. And the co-owner said, it's all because women wear little clothes nowadays. It makes the men act up. But I have to conform to dress code, and I haven't even showed as much as a shoulder. Well, I told my parents and friends, and they're all on my side and think that he's a complete weirdo. Honestly, I don't know what to do about it, and it's really creeping me out, and I'm scared to encounter him again. But my question is, do I have a stalker? So I had an odd encounter tonight that isn't too dramatic, but was creepy enough to me that I thought that I would share it. So for context, I'm a guy working as a pizza delivery driver for around 2 years now. Usually I really enjoy the job. Sure, there's a creepy weirdo here and there, but overall, most stops don't give me alarm bells like what I experienced tonight. Anyways, I drive up to this house and immediately get a bit of an uneasy feeling. The guy seemed friendly enough on the phone, but you never know in this part of town, and his voice was rough, like he'd been smoking his entire life. He doesn't come to the door at first, so I have a minute or so to glance through the door at the guy's living room. Usually I wouldn't be so nosy, but the inside front door is wide open, leaving only a rickety glass door between me and his living room. As I try and spot where he is in the house, a lot of the times we have to knock more than once, especially if it's an older customer. I notice that he has some photos above the kitchen door frame, directly across from the front door. Now, normally this is nothing, right? Were it not for what the photos were of and how they were placed. The first 2 photos weren't framed, and they seem to have been cut out of something. They're small and depict the same exact photograph. A grainy black and white portrait of a young boy, somewhere between the ages of 6 and 10. While it's weird that they were duplicates, what's even weirder is that they look like missing child photos. Specifically the kind that you would see on a poster from the 70s or the 80s. Think of missing kids photos like the ones of Ethan Patz, but specifically how they appeared on the old milk cartons, not just the original photos. At first, I thought that they might have been missing person reconstructions. They were so grainy, flat, and weird. But hung in between the 2 pictures was a little bundle of sticks. They reminded me of those scented brooms they sell in stores, except without a handle. On the other side of the bundle, there was an old newspaper clipping with a woman who had a hairstyle from the 60s or the 70s, and just like the photos, it wasn't framed and instead just sort of taped to the wall. Now, before I could get a better look at it all, the guy came to the door and paid for his food. I left with a tip and I went on my way. Now, I know that there could be a myriad of reasonable explanations for the photos, and besides, I'm in college to go into writing. I've got an imagination and I've seen a serial killer story or two. I tried dismissing my initial gut feeling by wondering if it wasn't a memorial for a past friend or family member. He could also just be one of those people who tries and solves old cases from home or whatever, but the whole situation just gave me a very uneasy, sinister, and disturbed feeling that I just cannot quite shake. I mean, if they were just photos, I wouldn't have noticed, but like I said, these were photographed like missing child posters. Not the kind of image you would stick on the living room wall in January, right? Even as someone who has a small vintage photo collection, my gut had a very negative reaction to them. I might be overthinking it, and I'm sure that there's an innocent explanation, but it is genuinely the first thing to creep me out on this job in a while. At the time of this encounter, I was 19 years old and I had just closed the store that I was working at with another coworker. They drove home, and since I lived just right across the street, I thought that I was safe to walk home alone. After all, it was just a 2-minute walk to my apartment. The apartment that I lived in had an auto shop below the building, which my uncle owned, and it was around 9:30 at night, so it was pretty dark out. The roads were empty, and not even 10 seconds after I walked across the street, a dark blue minivan pulls up beside me out of nowhere. This kind of startled me, so I looked at the driver in confusion. I was carrying some bags of stuff that I'd bought from work, and the guy driving the van noticed and asked if I needed a ride. I kindly declined his offer and just told him that I just live a few minutes away, and so I continued walking. But the guy started slowly following me and continued, "Are you sure you don't need a ride? I don't mind." He asked, and again I declined and continued to keep walking. But he was persistent, and this started to creep me out a bit, so I started walking faster and ignored him as he repeatedly said things like, "Come on, get in the car." I was afraid to run inside the apartment because I really didn't want this creep to know where I lived, so I was going to just loop back around the building to lose him. Thankfully, that's when I noticed the auto shop's lights were on and the garage door was open, which meant that my uncle must have been working late in his shop that night. So I speed walked towards the open garage, and the van sped off in a hurry as soon as they were about to pass my open garage door. I told my uncle about what had just happened and waited a few minutes before walking back out to get into my apartment. I locked all my doors and windows, and I stayed in the living room until my dad came home from our cousin's house. Thankfully, I never did see that van again. I did finally buy some pepper spray after this incident, though. I usually always had my weighted pocket knife on me, but I'd actually left it at home that day after using it to cut thick string from some crafts that I was working on. But to everyone out there, even if you only have a 2-minute walk to get to your destination, even if you think you're safe, please treat it like a 20-minute walk home at night in a really sketchy town. Always be on high guard and continue cautiously when going anywhere alone. If you, at any point, don't feel safe either walking alone and you have anyone like friends or family around that you know that you can trust, that they wouldn't mind giving you a ride or even tagging along with you, then don't be afraid to ask because, like me, it might actually just save your life. For context, I'm a dog walker living on the west coast of Scotland. It was a rainy, miserable day sometime in August, and I had about 5 dogs in my van to take on a group walk. And as it was rainy, I decided to take them to the beach as it would likely be empty on such a terrible day. As I turned off onto the quarter-mile track leading down to the beach, I caught up with another car that was driving down there as well. I'll admit that I was a bit peeved because I was hoping to get the beach all to myself, but there are 2 boys, separated by a load of rocks that you cannot cross easily, with 2 separate paths leading down to them from the car park of this particular beach. So I figured that I'd let these guys park up and see which bay they wanted to go on, and I would go into the other bay. As I followed the car into the otherwise empty car park, I immediately pulled into the first space on the right, whilst the car that I was following appeared to carry on driving right to the end of the car park, about 30 to 40 yards along. It's a small car park, more of a field, but whatever. So I turned my engine off and looked out of my passenger side window, and the car was still driving along. I gave it a minute and leaned over to look out of the window again, and the car was just inching forwards, as if it was finally about to stop. I waited a bit longer, expecting to hear the sound of a car door opening and shutting, but I didn't hear anything. So I leaned forwards and looked again, and the car was still inching forwards as though it was just about to stop. It had seemed to be just about to stop forever at this point, but it didn't strike me as odd yet. I was just getting impatient, wanting them to get out and pick a beach and leave me to myself, and anyway, at this point the dog started to whine a bit. Presumably a bit confused as to why I just parked up and sat there and not letting them out, I suppose. So I decided to get out and open the back doors of the van to placate them. They're crated, so they wouldn't be able to jump out or anything. I got out and walked around to the back of the van, glanced over to the car that was still just slowly pulling into its car parking space. At this point, I'm still not thinking anything is off. I just thought that this was the slowest driver in the world, and I'm getting a little bit impatient, and I just want to get on with this and have a busy day. After glancing at the car, I opened my back doors, roughly would have taken about half a second probably, and looked back at the car again, and it was just gone. There was no sign of it anywhere. Now, even if they moved at lightning speed, there is no way out of the other end of the car park. The only way out was the way that we both came in, which would have required for the car to turn around and drive past me. And I know that this wasn't possible because, 1, there simply wasn't enough time for it to have turned around and drove past in like half a second. 2, I would have definitely heard it do so, as it would have been driving along the track about maybe a meter behind me. And 3, I would have seen it driving back up the quarter-mile track that we'd just driven down, and I looked back up there, and I can assure you that there were no vehicles. It's hard to convey just how impossible this actually is without you fully understanding the layout of the beach car park, but believe me, this is just not possible, which is exactly why I'm here. Does anyone have any idea about what happened here? The closest thing that I can come up with is a time slip. However, people usually report feeling strange or losing time and also going back significantly in time, whereas I felt nothing but irritation as to how long the car was taking to park. Though in retrospect, the fact that I glanced at it several times over the course of about 2 minutes, and it was always just pulling up into its spot every time, is a bit strange, I'll admit. The car was pretty modern. It was a Ford Mondeo estate car with a roof box on it. I didn't make a note of the year, but I would say definitely under 10 years. On a positive note, I got the beach to myself, I suppose, but do you have any idea as to what the heck happened that day? So last month, my sister and I moved into this old house from around 1890. It might have been 1860, I cannot remember, but since moving here, there have been some strange things going on that, for all I know, could just be coincidence or easily explainable. First is our backyard light. It has a motion detector on it, and it often is seen to turn on for no reason when I'm looking at the window. It could just be a malfunction, but I don't know, especially considering one experience that I had, which I'll share in a minute. But the second thing is that on many mornings I come downstairs to the kitchen, I will find several of our cupboards wide open. This could very well be a result of the house being so old and possibly drafty. It never seems to be the same ones. In general, there isn't any pattern. Also, none of the doors feel loose at all, and they all feel tight and even have magnetic latches, so it just doesn't make much sense. But one really unsettling occurrence, though, has to do with our basement lights. We have a basement that has those short and wide windows that go out to the ground level, and we see them from the outside. And on several occasions I've gone out at night, seen lights shining in the windows. Not reflections. I looked closely and they were definitely the basement lights. Then go back inside to find that the lights are off again. One creepy experience that I had was when I was feeding my sister's dog. The dog's food bowls are in the small mudroom or coat area, whatever it's called, that leads out into the backyard. There's a closet adjacent to the back door containing the dog food. It was late at night and I went to grab some food for the dog, and as soon as I opened the closet door, I just felt the best way to describe it is a strong presence. It suddenly got really nervous. Ignoring this, I reached in there and it was really cold. Not like the air was cold, but it was almost like a physical thing was there. Something that I was touching that was making a portion of my arm ice cold. When I turned around to put the food into the dog bowl, I got a sudden chill on my back. It felt like something moved into me from the closet. The scariest part, though, was that right as that feeling faded, the motion detector light that I mentioned earlier suddenly turned on, as if whatever was in the closet moved out into the backyard. Now, this next bit is leaning into the realm of wishful thinking, but I think that it's worth bringing up. So my sister claims to sometimes see apparitions, auras, and shadow people, etc. Ever since she had a near-death experience, that is. The primary reason that I believe her, too, is because of an incident at our old apartment. You see, I was in my bedroom in bed with my cat when he started staring at a spot directly above where my head rested, as if something was there. He stared at it for several minutes, and soon after I got up to grab some water, my sister was still awake and I commented on my lack of sleep. She happened to peer into my bedroom and said that she apparently saw a dark floating figure in there, at the exact spot where my cat had been looking. Anyway, back to this house. My sister has claimed to see several different apparitions in the house of various forms. During a recent night, every time she entered my bedroom, she would get startled and jump back, saying that she saw, for a split second, the figure of someone standing right beside my nightstand, in the corner next to my closet. Also, in relation to my bedroom, I sometimes hear this loud scratching coming from inside my walls, but only in one spot next to my desk. It could very well be a mouse, though. I'll try to get a video of it sometime, and if I can, I'll be sure to update you guys. But on one particularly creepy night, I was hanging out in my sister's bedroom watching TV with her when she said that she saw something outside her sliding glass doors that lead to the backyard. She described it as smoky and dog-like. Moments later, too, the motion detector light flicked on. Well, that was coincidence enough for me. I closed the curtains to help her feel better, but she seemed pretty disturbed and asked me to not go to bed. It was around 3 or 4 in the morning at this point. I stayed for a while, but soon enough, more weird stuff started happening. I heard a noise like paper being scratched on the other side of her bed, and there was indeed paper there, but it stopped moving, I guess you could say, as soon as I looked at it. And as I walked away, I swear that I felt something poke me in the spot right above my left butt cheek. Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous, and I joked about it to make myself less scared, but still, it was petrifying. And, well, that's about it so far. All of this has been happening over the month or so that we've lived here, and if you have any thoughts on everything, or if you think that we should do anything, then please do let me know. I'm also curious to know if anybody else here has had any similar experiences, and if you did you do anything about it? And most importantly, did it work? This happened to me about a month ago or so. I've been thinking about this experience a lot recently, and a friend of mine recommended that I share it here. This experience, it has kept me up at night recently, and the more I think about it, the more unexplainable it gets. So it was a Saturday, and I enjoy filling up my car on the weekend before the week begins. I needed to get gas, and before I left the house, I told my dad that I would be back in a few minutes. I just needed to go and get some gas down the road at my local Kroger, because it's like 3 cents off the gallon, and would be back shortly after. Anyways, for some reason I have an overbearing dad who refuses to believe that I know how to pump gas on my own, even though I've been doing it for like over 6 years. I leave the house to get some gas, and as I mentioned, the Kroger is right down the road. I have to make a massive left turn to get into the area, so I like to drive all the way around to avoid that massive turn, aka making a 2-minute drive into a 7-minute drive. As I'm making the drive about 3 to 4 minutes in, I notice my parents' car approach me and begin driving close behind me in my rearview mirror. Their car is unique as the color is specific, like grayish blue. I roll my eyes as I'm thinking, wow, they seriously think I cannot get gas on my own and am following me to make sure that I can? I approach a stop sign and quickly check my side view mirror to get a closer look, to make sure it's actually them, obviously annoyed. In my mirror, I see it's my parents driving. I know that it's my parents, and there's something off that I notice about them though. Their expressions are completely blank and just seem, well, empty, I guess. It's hard to explain, but it had to be my parents, but like, all the energy from them was just gone. They look like NPCs, for a lack of a better term. I decide to shrug it off and keep driving just the last stretch to the Kroger. As I turn into it, I notice my parents are no longer behind me though. I pull up to a pump and pull out my phone to check my parents' location, and weirdly it says that they're at home. There was no way that they had enough time to make it back home from where I had last seen them on the road though. I finished pumping gas and make my way home, still very confused by the encounter. Later that night I ask in a sort of laughing manner to my mum, "Hey mum, why were you and dad following me earlier?" She looks at me super confused and says, "What are you talking about?" I explain what I saw on my way to get gas, and she replies with, "Dad and I haven't even left the house today." I have to preface this by saying that my parents are incredibly religious, conservative, straightforward people, and would not prank me like this, nor would they lie about it. So I know with absolute certainty that they did not leave this house. Which begs the question, who or what was following me that day? Back when I was maybe 19 or 20, in college, I lived in this 5th floor apartment that had one balcony, the door to which was in my bedroom. I had a nightmare of some kind. I don't remember what it was about, but I woke up to a voice saying loudly and firmly, "He's out there," with a sort of mental nod at the balcony. The bizarre part was that I immediately knew what he looked like for some reason, and became that level of terrified that is, like, one shy of wetting the bed sort of thing. Scared enough that I felt the blood drain from my face, and the back of my mouth tasted metallic from the adrenaline. There was a window next to my balcony door, a little bit taller than waist height. The he was crouched out there below the window, just out of eyesight except for the top of his head. Had I been able to see the rest of him, he would have been dressed in filthy clothes with long greyish stringy hair and an unshaven face, and sort of gnarled old hands with yellowed fingernails. He had broken black teeth and He was rocking a little bit because he believed I was about to open the balcony door, and he was waiting anxiously to do something to me. I was not asleep, but looking back, I wonder if the nightmare that I'd been having before something woke me up somehow blurred into real life, and my brain just couldn't tell the difference. I could move, so I'm not sure if it was sleep paralysis, but I know that there was nothing out there, and I know nobody said he's out there because my roommate wasn't home and there wasn't a TV or radio on. I don't know what actually woke me up, but all I know is that I laid there and tried to slow my heart rate, but I kept panicking every time that I saw the sliver of the top of his head move or heard some kind of fabric shifting against the brick outside. Anyway, I realized suddenly that the door actually was unlocked. I never locked it because, well, 5th floor, right? I was young and stupid, but in my defense, I still figure the odds of anyone getting a ladder or something tall enough to scale a 5-story building to hide out on somebody's balcony, well, was pretty much slim to nil. In any case, it took me about 10 minutes of laying there, sweating and shaking, trying not to make any sound at all, scared out of my mind, before I could actually get the courage to sit up and move, and reach across the 3 or so feet to the door to turn the deadbolt. What is bizarre, though, is that when I did, I looked out the window and there was nothing there. Logically, that should not have surprised me. Again, 5th floor. Unlikely that anyone would randomly climb up there somehow. But for some reason, the fact that he was not out there, it did not calm me down. Mostly because, well, one, I might be crazy. I mean, what had I been staring at that was moving that I thought was the top of his head? Or worse, two, he was somewhere else now, and I did not know where, but it could be through my roommate's open window for all I know. In any case, I was terrified and literally sat in my room paralyzed with fear. I didn't call 911 because I wasn't about to tell them something that insane, but I probably should have, right? I stayed locked in my room until my roommate came home a few hours later, and to this day I really have no idea what that was, why it happened, or even really what happened at all. I just remember that it was the most afraid that I have ever been. So this happened a few years ago when I moved into this old house in a small town. It was super cheap, probably should have been a red flag, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The guy who owned it before me, he had died, but he was old, so I just figured normal stuff, right? The first few nights were pretty chill as well, but then I started hearing footsteps in the hallway late at night. I live alone, by the way, but I told myself that it was the house settling or something dumb like that. But the sound kept getting louder, like someone walking back and forth right outside of my bedroom door. Finally, one night, I was like, okay, enough, and opened the door with a flashlight, but there was nothing there. But weirdly, the air that was there was freezing cold. Like so cold that it made my breath fog up, and it was the middle of summer. Stuff started getting weirder after that too. Doors would open on their own, lights would flicker even though the wiring was new, and the mirror in the bathroom. Sometimes I'd see a shadowy figure behind me, but when I turned around there'd be nothing there. Then one night, at 3 a.m., I heard whispering downstairs. It sounded like multiple voices, but real low and creepy. I grabbed a baseball bat and I went to check it out. Stupid, I know, but when I got to the living room, there was an old man just sitting in my chair. I swear that he wasn't solid though, he was kind of blurry around the edges. I instantly froze. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. After a few seconds, he slowly turned his head and looked at me, and his eyes were just black. No whites, no pupils, just completely black. And then he smiled, but it wasn't normal. his mouth stretched way too far, like almost ear to ear. Well, I noped out of there quickly, grabbed my keys, ran to my car, and I just drove. I left everything behind, and I got someone to pack my stuff the next day, and I sold the house as fast as I could. I lost a lot of money from that, but to be honest, I didn't care. Sometimes, late at night, I still think that I hear footsteps. I don't know if it followed me or if it's all just in my head, but either way, I'm never going back to that place. I just want to start off by saying that I was and still am mostly very skeptical about paranormal stuff, but I do believe a little bit now. So I watch a lot of investigator YouTubers like Sam and Colby, and I've seen the equipment that they use. I've also seen some others use apps on their phones, but I've always felt that phone apps could be easy to fake. So I thought, I know how to code, and I wonder if I could program my own app. I managed to get the code working, and basically, how my app works is that it picks up either a tap on the screen or the phone physically moving. There's no EMF or anything. It's actually just physical touch, but when it picks up one of those two, it randomly selects a word from a huge list of words and displays that word. I couldn't get the text-to-speech to work, so it just pops up the word up on the screen. Anyway, I sent the build to my phone and began testing it. I waited a while, but this was the first conversation that I had. I asked, "Is anyone there?" and my phone responded with Josh. I said, "Hello Josh, who are you?" and my phone said, "Father." "Oh, are you a father?" "No." "Oh, are you asking me if I am a father?" "Well, yes I am." Then my phone responded with wife. "Wife? Do you mean my wife?" And then my phone said, "Danger." Well, at that I immediately closed the app, pretty freaked out, and went to check on my wife because, well, that was weird. My wife at the time was also heavily pregnant and was due any day. Every time my wife had been pregnant, I have had a fear of her dying in childbirth, so when it told me that my wife was in danger, that close to giving birth, it really got to me. Well, that weekend, my wife went to the hospital and gave birth to our daughter, but during the birth, she, my wife, lost a lot of blood. So, seeing that message freaked me out even more. Everything was fine and she's alive and well, but still, it freaked me out. Now, going back to when I was testing the app's movement detection sensitivity and trying again to get TTS to work, I must have messed up somewhere, but after I sent it to my phone and started it, it went nuts and cycled continuously through words, too fast for the TTS to say what word it picked up, but it did stop on 3 words and said them. And those words were demon, acknowledge, and me. As soon as I heard it say those words, I did not react audibly. I calmly picked up my phone, closed the app, and went back to making adjustments to the code. I have limited demonology knowledge, but I do know that if a demon asks for acknowledgement, you do not do it. I'll admit as well that I have not even opened the app since this happened, and now I'm really worried that there might be a demon in my house. My wife and I moved into a newly built house in a housing estate in the west of Ireland 5 years ago. It's a very bright, modern home and has a good overall energy. However, very early on I got a creeped out feeling when putting things in the closet or storage in the attic. The attic is fully converted into a bedroom with a full bathroom, and it was done at the time of the build. Proper stairs, dormer window, etc. It's not dark and it's pretty spacious, to be honest. The closet is right on the attic landing, so it's right in the center column of the house, meaning that it's surrounded on all sides by other rooms, bathroom, landing, my office, and a crawl space, and it has no windows. Where I used to sit in my office, the closet was over my right shoulder, and I used to feel something touch my hair on that side. It was as if someone was flicking a single hair very lightly. After a few months of this, I moved my desk to the opposite side of the room, and now it happens over my left shoulder, a direct line from where the closet is behind me. No windows on that side of the room, no heaters, and it's always the same place. I've also heard, talking. It's more like 3 conversations all layered on top of each other at once. It's only for a second or two, so it's just whispered gibberish, but the second that I turn around, it always stops. I tried ignoring it, until one night, my wife said that she felt like someone was watching her at night from our bedroom walk-in closet, which is right below the closet in the attic. Again, it's fully surrounded by other rooms with no windows, and she said that she just couldn't fall asleep with her back to it either. Another night, I was going to bed. I usually stay up later than my wife because I work from home, and I noticed a shadow, or more like an absence of light or a void, on that landing. I actually walked past it, and when I turned around to take another look, it stood up and swooped towards me and went up over me. It made me take a step back in a defensive reflex to it. And at this point, my wife and I had been comparing our experiences pretty regularly, and when I told her of this, she was really creeped out. She told me she forgot that one night she woke up and something was at the foot of the bed, and when she sat up, it apparently did the same thing, swooped towards her and upwards and then disappeared. There's been other things too. We've heard the sound of our bedroom shutters opening when we're downstairs, that distinctive sound of the magnet opening and then folding and hitting the wall. I go to investigate, but they're closed and nothing is out of place. Also, our shirts get 3 tiny holes, always in the same place, that we just cannot explain. It started out that just my wife's shirts would have 3 perfect holes in a triangle to the left of center near the bottom. Not pierced holes, but just perfect tiny circles in a triangle. Always the exact same pattern and shape. I thought that it was something that was catching on her at work, or her car seatbelt, or the washing machine or something. But then, after 6 months, it started happening on my shirts and t-shirts as well. We've switched cars multiple times. We obviously don't wear the same belt. I've checked the kitchen counter for something that we might catch on when, doing food prep or washing up or anything like that, but really, there's nothing. And I have no idea what is causing it. Also, my wife sometimes gets bruises on her legs and arms as well. Not just like in the morning or whatever, but she'll notice a huge bruise form while we're sitting and watching TV that definitely wasn't there at least an hour before this. Anyways, a few nights ago I saw it again, just in a ball in the corner, but only visible when you didn't look directly at it. Hard to explain, but that's the best that I can do. It used to be concentrated in the center column of the house, but now it seems to be on both sides of the room, which really has never happened before, and the whole situation seems to be escalating. I'll admit that we're reluctant to do anything to get rid of it, in case it gets worse than what it already is. But should we? It's not an evil feeling, I guess, but it is weird. The void figure is certainly weird, and it seems to be showing up more often. When I was around 7 to 8 years old, I'm 39 now, I was in my granny's house watching TV. It was only me, my gran, and my older cousin that were in the house, and it was a Sunday at around 3 p.m. I remember this because Every Sunday, the football results would be announced on TV, and my older cousin would always lay on the floor with a notebook and write them down. Don't ask me why, but they just always did it. But anyway, I used to hate when the results were being read out, so I decided to leave my Gran's house and head back home. So I said goodbye to my Gran, never said anything to my cousin as he was busy laying on the floor, writing his results down, and I walked into the next room, the kitchen, where my Gran had a walk-in cupboard where the jackets were kept. I opened the cupboard, saw my green jacket hanging up, stepped inside the cupboard to pull the jacket off the hook, and suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, locking me in there. In pitch-black darkness, I fumbled around and grabbed the round door handle, turned and pushed, but nothing. It honestly seemed like somebody was on the other side of the door holding it shut. But then, and for the unbelievable part, I start to hear a low, deep noise, kind of sounding like those guys that do the throat singing thing. I don't know what it's called, but then like a male voice whispered softly in a sort of Arabic language. I'm now screaming, crying, punching and kicking on the door, and it's still not opening. The voice in the low sound is still chanting away in the background. I'm panicking like crazy by now, and my heart is beating out of my chest. I then lean on the floor with my shoulder and push my feet on the back wall, and then the door suddenly flies open. I stumbled forward and fall onto the kitchen floor. And when I do, I suddenly look around, and there's no one there, holding the door. In my head, I was convinced that it was my older cousin that was playing a prank on me, so I run back into the living room, and my cousin is still laying on the floor in the exact same spot, writing his football results down, and my Gran is still sitting in her chair, and they both sort of look at me like they hadn't heard a thing. My Gran saw that I was distressed and asked me what was wrong. I said nothing and put my jacket on, and I walked home, and I never told anyone what happened. For years, this has played in my mind, and the whole event must have lasted only maybe 30 seconds or so, but inside it felt like a lifetime. I'm certainly not a superstitious kind of person, but this 100% happened to me, and I cannot explain how I got locked in there, as there was never a lock on that cupboard door to begin with, and it was only ever a round turn handle, but most of all, I just cannot explain that noise and the voice that I heard. I don't know with being a kid if it was just my imagination playing up on me or something to that effect, but to this day I still cannot explain what happened. So, what do you guys think? So to give a little bit of a background, my whole life I've been sensitive to supernatural events. I've experienced a lot of unexplainable things, I guess you could say, and I always do my best to find a plausible or logical reason for things happening, and about half the time I would say that I do. My aunt recognized my sensitivity and taught me how to hone in on clairvoyance when I was a kid to help me to be able to decipher these situations as well. Believe what you will, but I'm confident in my abilities and experiences. So, fast forward to this past month. I was home alone with my baby, no dogs as she had passed a couple of days before, or other people or other pets or anything, just me and my tiny human. I live in a home with 2 levels, and I was in the bedroom in the basement finishing changing my kid's diaper when all of a sudden I hear people talking loudly upstairs. I rushed up and discovered my TV turned on and opened a streaming app that I never use. The remote was sitting upstairs on the kitchen island, so it was impossible for it to have been accidentally bumped by me or the baby. On another occasion, my dad was visiting from out of state to help my brother move, and he brought his travel water flosser that he had sitting on the bathroom counter. While my brother was brushing his teeth, my dad's water flosser turned itself on and shot a little bit of water out at my brother. This could be explained by a short from water getting into it where it ought not to be getting into. So this event has a potential non-paranormal reason, but it was still a bit weird. Nothing else happened during that visit though. another occasion, my mother was visiting the next week for the holidays and staying in my guest room. One night she felt a presence around 3:30 to 4 in the morning, so she sat up in bed and suddenly the ceiling light turned on. This light turning on randomly in the middle of the night at that time, it's happened before and I've chalked it up to the weird wiring in my house, until now that is. Today, I was reorganizing my pantry while my baby was napping. The light above me in the hallway flickered. I then felt something brush past behind me. Then my kid's pushwalker that I had turned off after the baby went down for a nap started making sounds. It has like a little fake phone on it, and it will ring and say hello, hello over and over again. That was the sound that it made, and I went to check it immediately, but it was still turned off, so I have no idea how that's possible. Then later this evening, I did a smudging and cleared everything, and at the end I said that if anything is left in here that desperately needs to talk to me, and to switch my TV from what it is on now so that I know that I need to properly communicate. My smudge suddenly went cold though, and my TV turned off. The remote was on the counter behind me and I was holding my baby, so again, there is no way that anybody bumped it. So, any one or two of these events happening, I normally wouldn't be concerned, but they're happening more frequently, and also other people are visiting and noticing things too. I even had an HVAC person come in and check my house for CO2 leaks yesterday to make sure that my guests and I are not being mildly poisoned, causing hallucinations, but there were no problems. All of my detectors are already installed for it, and it's functioning properly. I plan on inspecting my house further for a reasonable explanation, and then I'll try to fully communicate with whatever it is tomorrow when I have a couple of hours alone. I'll definitely share any updates if anybody is interested, but I just felt like I really needed to share this and get it off my chest. So, thanks for coming to my TED Talk if you've made it this far. So I was 4 when we moved back to my dad's childhood home where he grew up. Let me give you the layout of the house for a better understanding. So the house had 3 bedrooms. My parents' room was directly in front of the entrance. To the left of my parents' room was my room and the kitchen, and just a few steps into the hallway from the entrance to the right of my parents' room was the bathroom and my brother's room. So, ever since we moved into this house, I always felt scared in my parents' room. And this, even though I love watching horror stuff, I don't get scared that easily. I can watch the whole horror movie by myself and could go outside in the dark alone, or could even sleep in my room alone without any fear. But if you ask me to stay alone in my parents' room, there is just no way in heck that I would. I have experienced many things in there, but these 2 stand out the most. So I was in high school and I came home and nobody was home. I went into my room, and from my room I could see half of the hallway, and then there is the blind spot from where I can't tell if someone went to my parents' room or to the bathroom or to my brother's room. And it was a small house, so I could pretty much hear every sound of the doors opening, and there was only one entrance. I could clearly see who was coming in and going out is what I'm getting at. Now, I was sitting on my bed texting my best friend, and I heard the entrance door open. I looked up and saw my mum coming in, and she stopped just before the blind spot, and she looked straight at me. We made eye contact, and she kept looking at me as if she was angry at me. It was weird, so I asked her what had happened. Did I do something wrong? She didn't reply though, just kept staring at me. And here I was thinking, oh no, did I mess up or something, and am I in trouble? And then she said, come into my room, and she went inside. So I got up immediately and went to her room, but when I did, there was no one there. I called for her, but there was no reply, and then I thought maybe she went to the bathroom because, remember, these rooms are in the blind spot for me, so I went to the bathroom. "Mum, are you in there?" But there was no reply. I then checked inside and it was empty. Then I went to my brother's room, but that was empty as well. I called for her again, but there was no reply. Then I realized that if that was my mother, she would have replied to me by now. I mean, it's one thing if it was my brother who would be trying to play a prank on me, but not my mum. I went outside to see if she was home, and there she was, talking to my aunt on the front of the house. I went up to her and asked, "Did you just come outside?" And she said, "No, I came outside like an hour ago." I told her what happened, and she didn't believe me. A year passed by and nothing ever really happened after this, but it was the summer, and one day suddenly the AC in my room stopped working. It was getting dark, so the technician said that he would come the next morning. I had no choice but to sleep in my parents' room, so their bed is on the right side of the door, and I placed my mattress perpendicular to their bed, so I was in front of the door, so I could see the hallway front of the kitchen, and the lights were off, but there was light coming from the outside, so it wasn't completely dark. The door was open because my mother has a bit of a phobia from her childhood that she can't sleep with the door closed. It was around midnight, I would guess, and I wasn't able to sleep. I was just sort of turning side to side, and by this time now, my back was facing the door, and then when I turned back, I saw my mother going from the kitchen towards the bathroom. I didn't think too much of it. I mean, maybe she left when I was facing the other way. So I waited for her to come back so that I could ask her to bring me some water on her way back. 10 minutes go by, but she didn't come back. Then I was like, did she really go out, or was I just tripping? So I got up to see if she was still in bed, and there she was, sleeping peacefully. I laid down. I was not scared at this point. Then I closed my eyes, trying to fall asleep, and then I felt as if someone stepped onto my mattress. I thought, oh, maybe it's Dad going to the bathroom, and of course, I mean, I'm lying down in the middle of the way out, so obviously he has to step onto my mattress in order to go out. So, no problem. I didn't open my eyes, and then his next step, he stepped right next to my feet. I could feel that my feet touched his feet, and then he stopped. Okay, it's dark, so maybe he's deciding where to put his next step so he doesn't end up stumbling upon me. A couple of seconds pass by, and he's not moving, so I just pull my legs up so that he gets the idea that he can move forward. After 20 or 30 seconds, I put my legs back to where they were, and I ended up touching his feet again. I was a little bit annoyed, like, come on, Dad, move. So I gently tapped onto the side of his feet 2 to 3 times with mine, signaling that he could move forward. But he didn't. And mind you, I haven't opened my eyes yet. I really don't know why I hadn't yet, but I just didn't. And if you ask why I haven't spoken yet, well, there is a bit of an unspoken rule in my family that when my mother is sleeping, you don't make a noise because she's a light sleeper and you could wake her up even with the sound of turning pages, and then she'll have a hard time falling back to sleep. We just feel really guilty if we end up waking her up, so we try to be exceptionally quiet. So after I tapped him and he didn't move, I tapped again, not moving. Then I opened my eyes because I was frustrated at this point. And as soon as I opened them, I saw him going out of the room, and from the back I could only see his white t-shirt. Then I waited for him to come back so that this time he could go back to his bed easily. I waited 20 minutes at least, and he just never came back. Then it hit me. I was like, wait a minute. And I turned on my phone's flashlight to see if he was in bed or not. And there he was, sleeping soundly. Which means that whatever I was experiencing in this house, I had touched it. I quietly laid back down and pulled the covers over my face. I tried to calm myself down, collected my thoughts. I mean, it wasn't sleep paralysis because I was able to move my body the entire time. and I had for sure felt those feet. And now, to make sure that I wasn't dreaming, I texted my best friend that I saw something, just so that when I wake up the next day I could verify it. Then I prayed and eventually I went to sleep. Now, the next morning I tell my mother what had just happened, and I was only about halfway through when my dad interrupted and said it was just a dream, and I remembered the text that I sent last night. I pulled out my phone, looked up at the text, and it was there. I showed it to my mum. See, it says 12:30, which means that I wasn't dreaming. I was wide awake. After seeing the text, that is when my mother's face turned a bit pale, and I said to my dad that you yourself have experienced stuff like that. I expect at least from you to believe me. And my mother said, okay, tell me what happened next. I told her that I then saw Dad going out, and she said, wait a minute, but he wasn't wearing white last night. And well, we just could never figure out what happened that night. I still remember the feeling of touching those feet though, and it's something that I'll never forget. This took place about 5 years ago in the house that I'm currently living in. My friend and I, we were waiting in my living room for my dad because he was our ride to another friend's place. We were both 15 at the time, so we didn't have our licenses yet. He eventually poked his head around the corner to let us know that he was ready. We both got up and walked around the corner to then enter my kitchen, which leads to my back door. And as we entered the kitchen and turned towards the back, we both saw the side of my dad going around the corner to my back door. To the back left side of my kitchen from where we were standing, there is an entryway with 3 short steps that goes down to a small landing area where you can access the basement or the door to my backyard. We followed right behind him, but as we turned the corner, he just was not there. The back door was still shut and locked, which meant that the only way that he could have gone was the basement. I thought that this was very strange because he would have had to have sprinted down those steps in order to get out of our sight in that short of time frame, but neither of us heard any commotion. At this point, I was weirded out but figured that he was just pulling some sort of a joke on us. I began calling down the steps to him for a good 15 seconds with no response. At this point, my friend and I were starting to get slightly annoyed because our buddy had been waiting on us for a good amount of time. I turned to look at my friend with a confused expression, when all of a sudden, we heard my dad begin to whistle from the living room where we had just come from. We both sprinted up the short landing, through my kitchen, and into the living room where we found my dad. I instantly started freaking out, asking him how he was able to get from the back landing area back to our living room so quickly. And he explained that he never entered the kitchen after calling us, but instead turned the other way to my mum's office to let her know that we were leaving. But my friend and I both clearly saw my dad, and to this day, it is still one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me. The apparition, it was crystal clear, not foggy or transparent like the way Hollywood makes ghosts look, and was an exact replica of my dad. For context, I live in a very small trailer court, and directly next to us is a railway that goes across the whole state and leads to a Wally World if you head down for like 20 minutes. Now, I was a teenager in 8th grade at the time, with no car or transportation other than a bike. The railroad tracks go in a straight line directly leading to Walmart, so if I were to bike to the Walmart, it takes me about the same time as if I walk straight down the tracks. So, more often than not, I would walk as I was never really a big fan of riding bikes as I have had back issues since a young age. Now, on this date in particular, I decided to head to Walmart for dumb kid stuff shortly before the sun was about to set. Basically, I went to the store and got distracted just looking around, bought some food and drink and some trading cards, but left as the sun was going down. It's about a 20 to 25 minute walk home, and I decided to head down the tracks again. At about a 10-minute mark, it was getting very dark, and I was a generally fearful and anxious child due to my autism. I was scared of the dark until at least about 14 and a half, and would often have nightmares or see things that weren't there in my closet or dark corners, etc. So as it became too dark to see, I was getting extremely nervous and hypervigilant. 5 minutes later, I could have sworn that I was hearing footsteps crunching in the rocks lining these tracks that weren't mine. I stopped a few times to listen and confirmed that someone was walking towards me from a significant distance away. I couldn't see them at this point because of the darkness and lack of lighting across the railroad tracks. I had no phone or flashlight of any kind either. I started freaking out internally. At first, I didn't know what to do, but as the sound of the footsteps got closer, I decided to call out and let them know that I was coming towards them. I stopped as I did this and said something along the lines of, "Is someone there?" While I know that this might seem silly as an adult, I was used to my brain playing tricks on me in the darkness, and at first I was convinced I was hearing things, and there was no response. At this point, the footsteps were getting closer, but still difficult to distinguish over my own, so I stopped. The footsteps, they continued for a brief moment, and then they stopped too. I called out again and I said, "Hello, is anyone there?" No response again. I was still prepubescent and I had a child's voice at the time, and I feel like any reasonable adult would have responded and said yes, or "Yeah, I'm just walking," or whatever, as I had genuine, noticeable fear in my voice. After I received no response again, I told myself that I was just imagining it, and continued on my journey, at this point being just under 15 minutes from my house. And then I heard them again, footsteps coming closer as soon as I started walking. Fear took over now, and I started yelling and making whooping sounds, thinking that it might be some sort of an animal. I yelled things like, "I know you're there and I have a knife," which was total BS, but I thought that it might encourage this person to respond. But still, nothing. A few times as I was speaking, I would hear the footsteps stop again. Finally, about 3 or 5 minutes later, stopping multiple times and hearing these footsteps stop. Sorry, I can't give a super specific time frame. I was in total fight or flight mode, scared out of my mind, so it gets a little hazy from here, but I start seeing this guy materialize out of the darkness. He had on blue jeans, a dark hoodie with a hood completely masking his face from a distance. I was instantly relieved for whatever reason. Relieved to know that I wasn't crazy, maybe. I don't know, and began verbal vomiting to this guy that I was just scared, and I didn't know that he was on the tracks. He again didn't respond though, and this was before mainstream Bluetooth audio and all that, and I didn't see any headphone cables even when I passed him, so it wasn't like he was just ignoring me because he was listening to music or something. But because he didn't respond, I was eyeing him warily as he approached, and we locked eyes at one point, and I will never forget the chill that ran down my spine. He was staring at me coldly and blankly, with a menacing look in his eyes, like he was thinking about what to do. He had his hands shoved in his pockets, and as I was passing him, he looked like he was going to pull something out with his right hand. I was a very scrawny kid, and even though I did have back problems, I was pretty quick still. I would just hurt from running for too long, but from then on, going down the tracks, I was at full sprint, and everything from this point on is just genuinely a blur. I know I tripped and fell twice, as well as soaked myself in mud when I tried to get across the small ditch separating the track from the trailer park, but eventually, I got home. I never told my mum, and I never walked on those tracks at night again after that. But the tracks, they're on an elevated hill next to the trailers, and you can either walk a minute in the wrong direction to get on it at the main road that I live on, or you can cut through this one small spot where some people had put a board down for that exact purpose, to get across the ditch and onto the tracks. The board, it was broken in half and partially submerged, so it was kind of like you had to sort of jump and land on the board with one foot and then kick off to the other side. The ditch, it's maybe about 3 feet across, so it's not a huge jump. but it always has nasty standing water in it. Once you get on the tracks, there's a super long stretch with absolutely no way off too, other than private property of a factory the railway delivers goods to, which you can get in trouble for trespassing on, obviously. But then there's a junction about 20 minutes down and another 5 minutes from there, which is where this Walmart is. Due to this, I couldn't just get off the tracks when I ran away. I had to get to the ditch before I would be able to, which all is to say that, really, I had to run from this guy because there was nowhere else to go. I recently had an unexplainable experience that I really don't know whether to classify as paranormal, creepy, or just really weird, because it feels like it sort of hits on all of them, I guess. To preface this, I'm a biologist and I'm skeptical of the paranormal and other cryptic notions, but keep an open mind that anything could be possible. But unless there is definitive proof from others or myself of such things, I won't believe such things are reality. With that said, here's what happened. So my colleagues and I were staying at a B&B in a rural part of Louisiana for a business trip, and on my final day there, I decided to explore the property of the owners. The property is a 26-acre plot of land, and the owners are also biologists and have created numerous trails and naturalist exhibits around the property that people will often explore. Something my colleagues and I were trying to do during our trip was to get to the creek that is on the property. It turns out it's far behind the house through dense woods, I would say about 3/4 of a mile behind the house and half a mile through a dense forest. After my co-workers tried and couldn't find the creek, due to a number of reasons, fire ant mounds, mosquitoes, and simply not finding it, I thought that I would try and find it to give me something to do. I'm very experienced in the outdoors, and bushwhacking is nothing new to me really, and I knew that I would likely find it with enough time and determination. I asked the owners the best way to get to the creek, and they gave me a trail to go on, but said that it would be unlikely for me to get to it because of downed trees from Hurricane Laura, which turned out to be the case in the end. Regardless though, I followed the trail they described, which ends at what I can best describe as an insect observation station. It's a cotton fabric attached to 2 poles and a light on the top so people can go and see the insects attracted to it. After this station, it's immediately woods with small barbed fences that you hop over to start your journey. Anyway, long story short, I get through the woods and found the creek after traversing down logs and walking through wetlands and bushes. And this is where things got weird. So after I get to the creek, I noticed a storm coming in overhead that I knew it was time to go back. I start my way back, and that was when I heard it. A voice. Very briefly, but I absolutely knew it was somebody talking. I couldn't make out what was said, but I froze and closed my eyes to focus on hearing, but heard nothing. No twig snapping, no voices, rustling, nothing. But I knew something wasn't right, and I quickly started making my way back to the point at where I had come in, which was easier said than done in the end. But on my way back, I heard something else, a giggle, and again I stopped, closed my eyes, and didn't hear anything again. I am now over this situation though and feeling completely uneasy. I focused on getting back to the insect station. I get back and hop the fence to the trail, and almost immediately, I just got goosebumps all over my entire body, uncontrollably as if I was freezing. I continued back to the house, warily, and luckily didn't hear or see anything, and went back inside and went to sleep. End of story. However, to add to this all, my colleague mentioned earlier when they went back there that they had heard twigs snapping with the weight of a human. They called out to whatever was out there, but they got no response and didn't hear anything else. They too are pretty experienced in the outdoors, but I thought that it could have been a deer, so I didn't give it much thought. But now, I don't know about that. I don't know what I experienced, and I don't know if I can say it's paranormal, but I would really appreciate if people could provide insights because I just don't know what to think of it. This started just like any other afternoon. I had just come home from the gym and I had just eaten when my friend called me and asked if I wanted to take a ride on my motorcycle. This is something that we do a lot, where we just sort of head out and drive around with good music and good vibes. And since it was really hot and a nice day, it couldn't fit any better really. So I grabbed my helmet, keys, and I headed to him. At first, we drove around a bit and just sort of vibed to some white girl music and lived life in the heat. As I was running low on fuel, we were about to head back when he suddenly pointed out a seemingly normal gravel path leading into the forest. As we had nothing better to do, we started to ascend the trail, which was pretty steep. It was so steep that my friend had to jump off for a bit while I drove up. When we reached more plain grounds, we decided that I should drive forward a bit, just to see if there was anything to see or if it was just a dead end or some random house or something. I started to drive ahead a bit, and was first met by a wavy sort of gravelly path for a while, until there on the left side was an opening in the trees, revealing a trail which had quite fresh tire marks. I thought that was a bit odd, but thought nothing of it really, and I just continued forward. And suddenly, on the trail in front of me, maybe 10 feet away, I saw a man standing by a car. As the road curved, the sight was sort of blocked, so he couldn't see me, but I could see out of his shape and some details that he was there. He looked to be in his 30s, I would guess, and wore a black cap and grey zip-up. I, at this point, started to think that maybe we were on private property. However, there were no signs at all indicating that. I, however, decided to turn around in any case and head back to my friend, so that we could go before the man by the car would manage to drive out after unknowingly not knowing that we were there and maybe spot us on the way out. I drove back to my friend, who was a little bit tired, having to walk up with his helmet on, and I told him about the guy that was further up the road. We were just sort of standing there, talking about following the trail into the woods on the left by foot, when we saw the headlights of a car approaching from where the car had been. At that point, we just sort of noped out of there, and he practically jumped onto my motorcycle, and we drove away. As we were heading back down the trail, the car approached us rapidly and was soon right on my tail. We both felt that it was time to go, and I pulled out onto the main road just to have the car copy our turn. I saw a smaller road that I had taken before that led to a bicycle path, which I took us down on. And as we looked back, we could see the car come to a complete stop on the road before slowly driving away. I know that this incident by itself may not be that disturbing, and it really isn't, I guess, and was just a bit of fun, I suppose. But the disturbing part of it is that we wanted to see the end of the road without having to go back again, so we looked it up on Google Earth, and what we found there is the really disturbing part. We found the road, but when we looked at the pictures, which must have been old because of the photos, there were like multiple houses on the side of the road and which looked to be in really good shape, with newly mowed grass and a caravan park next to it and all that. Obviously that was now not the case. But the situation, however, was pretty odd, as there was a lot of trash on the ground and what looked to be clothes spread around on the ground next to the gravel path. Something even weirder was that when I clicked along the path to see the end of the road, it was all blurred out and you couldn't see what was hidden behind it. I could show the pictures, I guess, from Google Earth right now, but since I didn't get any pictures of the road when we were there, I would really have no proof for anything. However, me and my friend did return this week, and we tried to get some pictures of where the houses were on Google Earth and what lies at the end of the road. There was a bit of a hasty change in plans, and me and my friend and another guy decided to head back to the place again today instead. I probably should have taken the advice of some people on being wary of returning, but something weird is definitely going on over there. It's almost like the forest and the path change, and the road had different paths this time. The biggest problem is that there is a cabin there now too, and I just cannot wrap my head around that. When we were there last time, we stood right where it was today, and it's not new. It looks like it had been there for ages. It is well kept though, which is strange. A new roadblock had appeared, blocking the path to the final part of the trail as well. We took the car there this time, and we had to walk the last bit since we couldn't get past the barrier. And as we walked, I had a really weird, odd sort of deja vu feeling, and I could have sworn that I looked over my shoulder at least 10 times. At the end of the path, an anonymous-looking building surrounded by a giant fence was there. Next to the building was a camouflaged radar that must have been connected to the building. Due to not wanting to reveal myself and to not get into trouble with a higher power, I refrained from photographing the building, but there was a Defense Department sign stating that doing so was highly illegal, and I didn't want to risk anything over a scary story. We noped out of there pretty fast though before returning to the roadblock, and we investigated the cabin that appeared out of seemingly nowhere. My friend went forward and looked in through the window as I had an eerie feeling about the whole thing. He looked for a second and then he took off running. I obviously followed suit and he just said to get into the car quickly. As we drove off, he explained that the inside looked fake and too fixed, and that he also saw a cup of coffee sitting on a table. He said that something was really off about it and that it sort of looked staged, was his words. In any case, we took off in the car and we headed out onto the main road again. But I'm in awe right now, and I don't know if I want to return or if I should stay away from there. We also investigated a bit around the house and found a couple of footprints from a boot and some other things. And like I said, I'm just torn right now. So, does anyone have an explanation for what this could be, or is it just something weird happening? If you have any theories as to what this all could be, then I would genuinely love to know. Also, this is going to sound a bit like a rant, and it very much is, but I'm sitting here now and don't know where to go with this, so I look close at Google Earth images and there's a whole house on its lawn has been wiped off of the radar. The house we found was one of 3, all in similarity to the one that we found, and everything just seems wrong about this place. I get a bit agitated and panicked when I look at the map because it's just so wrong and it just doesn't look right. Everything is different, and I think I need to go back to find the other houses, and this time I'm determined to get some pictures. This story is from my childhood, and look, I know that this is a strange one, but I'm just wondering if anyone has heard of anything like this before. So when I was 16, me and my friend, we went out to a park one day. It was a cold, snowy day, so we did what any rational teen would do and ventured under into a sewer pipe where it was nice and warm. We walked a ways into this pipe. It was quite notorious for my friend group. Did a little bit of graffiti in one of the grates where light shone through, then walked back to sit at the entrance together and talk. It was around this time that we heard a grating of metal against concrete. You would naturally assume at this point that it's a manhole being very, very slowly dragged across the street and opened for somebody else to come in. We heard this, mentioned it, and for the most part ignored it. The sounds, they continued though, like metal against concrete. Eventually, I catch something out of my peripheral. My friend is already focused on that direction too, and when I look, I first see the water in the pipe splashing. I'm curious because it's the dead of winter. I mean, why would they move it like that? Violently and up is what I mean. When I focus my eyes, that was when I see a hand and an arm bleached as white as paper, moving back and forth, splashing the water up and down. This was the water where we just were, where we graffitied, and now a being was there, supposedly, just out of nowhere, whiter than any human I'd ever seen, anorexic and hidden by a shadow. I ask if he sees, and he says yes. He sees a bleached white arm splashing the water where we were. And that was all it took for me to zip the heck out of there quickly. He followed in tow not soon after. Outside the pipe, he hesitates though and wonders if we should go back in because he hasn't seen something like that before and wonders what it was. I refuse though, and we eventually just continued with our day. Later in the week, I attempted to rationalize everything. Maybe all that hubbub about metal against concrete was the garbage man or a mailman, and her eyes were just playing tricks on us. My parents eventually informed me that they don't come out on Sundays though. They would not have been in the neighborhood. I tell this story to other friends in town, and they recount seeing a creature of the same make, bleached white, anorexic limbs with circumstances beyond anything normal, including flashes of light and screams in the forest nearby, etc. Sometimes I wonder, what did I see that day? Should we have gone back, and if we did, what would we have seen? If anyone has any intel or some sort of lore or anything, then I would love to hear it. Anything similar, I would genuinely love to know. Honestly though, I've sort of come to terms with the fact that I probably will just never know. I, a 41-year-old female, live in Montana, and a few years ago, I was forced to relocate after my landlord decided to rent to her son. The community that I had lived in for 11 and a half years has become incredibly expensive, $787,000 median home price. Unfortunately, I was forced to relocate to another city, and because of the unexpected move and associated costs, I moved in with a roommate. My roommate left eventually to pursue a better job prospect about 3 months after I'd moved in. Our unit was a triplex, so there were 2 gentlemen that inhabited the other units. I was never added to the lease as the property manager required a full deposit, and I was just not in a financially healthy spot at the time. I remained in the unit for 1.5 years on my own, paying the rent and the utilities. Eventually, I became very good friends with the man in the unit closest to mine. His name was Devon, 52 and male. Devon was a disabled veteran in recovery, and I also am a veteran, so he held a bit of a soft spot in my heart. We shared meals, hung out and discussed all of life's mysteries, and would look out for one another. Devon had gone to treatment for 6 weeks, and I had watched his cat while he was gone too. Our friendship developed over the course of 1.5 years. Devon had expressed romantic interest. However, right from the beginning, I clearly informed Devon that I didn't share those feelings and we would never be more than just good friends. Devon seemed to be lonely, which made sense. However, I'm a person who requires alone time to recharge my batteries. I set strict boundaries for Devon as he wanted to hang out all the time. I would catch him walking through the front yard multiple times a day to get the mail, which I believed was to see if I was outside so that he could stop to chat. When I would leave in the morning to go to work, Devon was always outside to tell me that I looked nice and to have a good day. I eventually told him that all made me feel a bit uncomfortable, and he should just send a text letting me know if he wanted to hang out sometime and wait for a response. There were a couple of times I yelled at him for sort of overstepping my boundaries. The first, I had just got home and pulled into my garage. I was on a phone call and had stayed in the car, and Devon looked through the garage window to see if I was home. I was annoyed, but didn't really think too much of it. The second, though, I was getting dressed in my room in the summer, so the window was cracked. I felt like this was safe as the window was not in a place that anyone could be walking by, as it was on my patio at the back of the home. But I caught Devon peeking through, and I completely lost it. I let Devon know that under no uncertain terms, his behavior was inappropriate, and that if he didn't respect my boundaries, we would no longer be friends. Last year, while I was still in the home, I had asked Devon to watch my dog for a couple of days so I could go to a family event out of state. Devon was happy to help, and I was genuinely very appreciative. Not long after I returned, I started to notice strange things in my home though, but I really just thought that it was me. Like, for instance, I would be fairly certain that I had locked my door in the morning when I had left for work, but when I returned, it would be unlocked. I would be sure that I had shut off all the lights, but when I got home in the evening, one would be on. I really just thought that it was absent-mindedness, but fast forward a couple of months and my mum became sick with cancer. My sister watched my dog while I went to tend to my mum. My sister reached out to me and she asked if anyone else had a key to my apartment. I let her know that she had the only spare key, but asked why, obviously. Similarly, she had experienced the same issues with lights and locks. I had not shared my concerns with my sister prior to her communicating hers with me, as I really just doubted my own sanity. While I was out of town, I received a text message from Devon asking if I had a potato that he could borrow. I let him know that I was out of state with my mum, who was sick. Devon didn't reply, which was sort of out of character, but I had noticed a change in Devon's effect. He was more reserved than ever and less friendly towards me. I thought it probably had to do with my firm adherence to my boundaries, which was fine by me. I mean, he didn't have to like them, but he had to respect them. But when I got back to town, one night I stayed over at my sister's house after helping her move. As mentioned above, I was struggling financially, so I would carefully budget and plan my weekly meals. The morning before my sister's move, I had placed 3 pieces of bacon into a Ziploc bag to be used later for a BLT. When I returned the following morning, much to my disbelief, there were only 2 pieces of bacon. I held the bag in my hands knowing that there had been 3, and it was at this point that I no longer doubted myself. I called my sister and let her know that someone had been getting into my house. I always keep the place locked, and the only logical thing that could have happened is Devon made a copy of my key when he had watched my dog in the fall. My sister reminded me about the potato text, and the potato in the counter basket was now gone. I had enough information to be pretty certain that my neighbor had violated my trust and was no friend at all. However, I still wasn't afraid of him, I guess. As I mentioned, he's a disabled vet and was somewhat feeble and sort of sickly. I wasn't scared of a confrontation, but I immediately went to the hardware store and purchased a camera that streams to your phone once the motion detector has been activated. I placed it facing the side door where Devon would enter. It also had 2-way audio capability, so my plan was that when Devon decided to enter my home again, I would see it and say over the camera something to the effect of "Get out of my house, put the key you copied on the counter, and never try to speak with me again or I'll contact law enforcement." As I said, I was not on the lease and didn't want to be homeless, so I couldn't turn to the property manager for help, and Devon knew that too. Now, in the evenings, I started placing a jug of cat litter and a kitchen chair in front of the door that I knew Devon was accessing the apartment from, but I never expected that he would attempt to come in while I was at home, and really, he had only taken a piece of uncooked bacon and a potato at this point. Laying on the couch one night, watching TV, I thought that I had heard something sliding on the floor in the laundry room where the door was, but I knew that there was no way that he would come in while I was home. My cat was running around playing, so I decided that it was probably just her and I was being paranoid because of all that had happened. The next morning, while changing my laundry, I noticed that the litter and chair had been pushed 3 to 4 inches. I checked the sensitivity of the camera and I found that I was able to replicate by slowly opening the door like that, which means that Devon had tried to come into my home while I was there. But why? That morning, I took bear spray into the shower with me while my knees knocked. Genuinely, I was terrified. I felt vulnerable and violated. Devon knew that I knew now also, and he knew that I had placed a barrier in front of that door. After that morning, he was never outside in the morning again, nor did he walk through the yard to get his mail. I obtained a firearm for protection and I did make a police report. The police officer was annoyed with me as I did not want him to approach Devon, as all Devon would need to do is report me to the property manager and I would be homeless. I'm grateful that whatever he was up to was apparently thwarted that night, but the fact that he tried to come in while he knew that I was home, it genuinely gives me the heebie-jeebies. I do wonder if he went through my underwear, watched me while I slept at any point. Since my situation has greatly improved now, I ended up moving out shortly after to take care of my mum. I got my own place again a few months ago, and I will never put my trust in another neighbor for pet house sitting ever again. It still blows my mind that I had some guy stealing from me and likely stalking me too. I guess this story just solidifies that one should always trust their gut. There were so many times that a red flag was screaming at me and I just thought that I was being crazy, and stupidly, I ignored it. Today I was listening to some scary stories, and it made me remember this event. At the time of this story, I was 14, and as well as being younger, I had developed crippling anxiety and depression. All I'll say is that I was, and still am, very vigilant about my surroundings. Now on this day, I had planned to stay the night at a friend's house. I had never stayed at her place before. It was always mine. For you to understand this story, I do need to explain the layout of this house. It was located on a sloped hill, and when you drove down a steep road, the first part of the house you would see was big and expansive. Honestly, it looked a bit like an old mansion. If you continue driving down, you would be met with two semi-separated buildings. Both were small and pretty run down. And when I say small, I mean one of them was just a bedroom and the other one was a bedroom and a small bathroom and kitchen. There were no doors inside, just a piece of cloth or beads to separate the bathroom entrance from the kitchen. My friend's room was the bedroom, and her mum lived in the other section with the bathroom or kitchen. The landlord of the property lived in the main house, the big mansion. It was located in the middle of the woods, and when I say that, I don't mean it lightly. I mean, all you could see was expansive Australian forest. Australian rainforests are incredibly dense too, and if you tried to walk through, you would most likely receive some type of bite at some point, whether that be a spider, an ant, a leech, etc. So, I'll cut to the first thing that happened. Me and my friend, we had walked into her mum's flat. I forget why, but I think we were either hungry or I was asking how to get reception, because there was none at the time, and called out for her mum. She was in the bathroom, and as we walked past a small window, I heard, "Yeah?" coming from outside. I turned to my friend, and she looked at me the same way that I did. We were really confused. If her mum was in the bathroom, that was right in front of us. Why did we hear a male voice coming from right outside? We brushed this off so as not to scare ourselves and continued having fun in my friend's room. For a little more context, the landlord used half of her room as storage and blocked off the back section of the room with a tall shelf and a divider. There was a huge glass sliding door at the front of her room too, and in the blocked off back section there was another door. You couldn't get to that door unless you squeezed through a section outside. Now, skipping forward a little bit to nighttime, me and my friend had to go to the bathroom, so we slinked out of her room and walked to her mum's flat. Her mum was fast asleep now. We used the bathroom as quietly as we could, and then we exited. As we were making the small walk back to my friend's room, we saw something out in the woods, a pair of eyes, looking directly at us from behind a tree. We panicked and froze. I pulled out my phone and took a photo before we sprinted back into her room, locking the glass door behind us and drawing the curtains. It's not a reach to say that we were already freaking out. We looked at the photo, and sure enough, when I brightened the image, there was what looked to be a man staring at us from the dark woods. Obviously, we were extremely scared, but I called my mother, who was about an hour away, and she just sort of dismissed us. And so after that, we were obviously scared, but it was a little comforting. Anyway, after a while we relaxed and chalked it up to our imagination playing tricks on us. We pulled out my laptop and put on a movie. I forget which movie we watched, but it was some cheesy rom-com, I think. And maybe 20 or 30 minutes into the movie, we froze and paused it. There were footsteps crunching on the dry leaves right outside of her room. We listened in horror as the footsteps moved through the tight alley that led to the back door. We both moved slowly, standing on the bed to look over the room divider. Our eyes were locked on the back door, and after a moment of complete silence, it turned. The doorknob wiggled slowly before it became faster. The door couldn't be opened as it was jammed against objects that were in storage, and then it stopped. No more noise. We were crying, holding each other in our arms, trying to stay as quiet as we could. Then the footsteps slowly crunched on the leaves in the opposite direction, back to the front of her room. We both didn't hesitate now, and I reached for my phone. We called the police, and after trying to explain the situation to the operator on the other end, in tears the whole time, she told us a unit was being dispatched and to stay where we were. But then, as we were still crying and hyperventilating, we heard a phone ringing. It sounded like an old landline phone, one with harsh and loud beeping. It was coming from the landlord's mansion. We waited silently, listening to the drawn-out ringing of his phone. After what felt like at least 2 minutes, it stopped, and we heard his voice as he talked to the operator. At this time, we both noticed another thing: fingerprints on her window. These windows were slated glass that you could open and shut with a lever. Whoever left these prints, they reached up, cupped their hand around the top of the glass, and dragged their fingers on the dust, because it definitely wasn't there before. Soon, the landlord walked to her mother's unit and had told her that the police called him. He seemed extremely upset and told her that he made sure that they didn't send a unit. Her mother came to her room and we explained the situation. Both the landlord and her mother didn't seem to be bothered by the fact that a man just tried to enter our room. After that, I couldn't stay the night, and neither could my friend. We were too scared to spend another minute there, so I called my mum and she came to get us at around 11 p.m. to 12 p.m. We dropped my friend back the next day, and when we got there, her mother told us something that I don't think that I can pass up as coincidence. You see, the night that it happened, it was raining, and there was a pretty strong wind, but nothing strong enough to do this. Next to her mother's unit, she had a pole that held beads and fairy lights and all that. During the night, right after me and her were picked up, it had been knocked down. Keep in mind, this pole was literally embedded into the cement and tied to other items with zip ties as well. So like I said, there was no way that could have been the wind. I mean, that pole was pretty darn sturdy. I am still unsure of an explanation to all of this. I mean, it may have been her landlord, right? I'm not too sure about that. It also could have been just a random man. Either way, I'm absolutely certain that there was somebody out there that night. I'm a 25-year-old person renting a 4-bedroom house. One of my roommates is my boyfriend, and the other is my best friend of 10 years. Her name is Tracy. We've been looking for a new roommate, and because of the way that this situation turned out, we have determined that I'm no longer allowed to be in charge of looking for roommates, because I am not judgmental enough and I am known to just ignore red flags. I'll start from the beginning though, which is the house showing. So, our new prospective roommate showed up for the house showing and introduced himself. He definitely seemed strange at first, but I wrote it off as him just sort of being eccentric. The main red flag was that, at some point, he randomly said something to the effect of, "And I will not bring meth into your house because I'm not on meth. I hate drugs and I see them as a scourge on this entire country." I didn't ask, so I was immediately weirded out, but my boyfriend and the roommate who was moving out also met the guy, and they both thought that apart from that, he seemed pretty normal. He didn't look like a stereotypical meth head by any means. His skin was clear, and he was kind of chubby. We thought that maybe he thought I was a meth head, because I look a little bit scary. I have green hair, a 1G septum, and 6 facial piercings. In addition, my roommate, who was moving out, turned out to be hiding a cat which made the house stink like cat wee, which I've been told is what meth smells like. Also, the town that this guy was coming from is known for meth and crack, and he seemed to be explicitly trying to get away from that town. So I thought that maybe he was afraid of ending up in a situation where he was living with drug addicts and was trying to suss us out that way. And so, giving him the benefit of the doubt was my first mistake. Me and Tracy, we were both sort of wigged out about the entire thing, but we were kind of desperate for a roommate, and all of the other people responding to my listing either were not great fits or were even sketchier than this guy. So in the end, we let him move in. Now, skip to the move-in date. He brings an old man to help move his stuff. He then proceeds to make the old man move all of his things by himself up the stairs while he sits there, including a refrigerator, by himself. The new guy signs the lease, and immediately after signing the lease, he informs us that he did not introduce himself using his real name, and proceeds to tell us his real name. This man was not transgender, so the only reason that I can think of as for why he initially gave us a fake name is probably so that he could avoid having us run a background check. After this, I had to go to work though. Throughout my shift though, Tracy sends me a message that the guy is weird, but her responses are sort of vague and I didn't find out what happened until I got home. But here's what she told me. So the new guy, he goes to the bar after signing the lease and comes back after being kicked out before 9 p.m. The bar that he went to is a biker bar that is notorious for being pretty rowdy. Honestly, it's pretty hard to get kicked out of there too. I mean, you pretty much have to be doing something pretty heinous, or you have to have been like creeping on a woman there in order to get kicked out. In any case, when he comes back, he is completely drunk. But the men there must have been intimidated by me, is what he said. Sounds to me more like he was creeping. Before this, I had told the new guy that our landlord is coming up the next day to fix some things in the house. When the new guy came home, Tracy reminded him that our landlord was coming the next day, and he became extremely angry, to the point that he was flailing his arms and she thought that he was going to start breaking things. Tracy was so uncomfortable that she almost went to go and wake up my boyfriend in the other room. Eventually, the new guy did calm down, however, and so she just left it at that. Now, there's this beanbag that we have next to my couch, and Tracy was sitting on the beanbag with her legs sort of slung over the armrest of the couch. At first, the new guy sat on the couch. He begins to read off poetry that he wrote for her an entire hour and a half before, all of which is literally just streams of consciousness about how he wants all junkies to die. Afterwards, he starts telling her how beautiful she is over and over, and literally lays his head down between her legs. She's trying to ignore him and obviously trying to get him off her, and he won't stop asking her if she fell asleep. Every time she moves, he gets a little bit closer. Then he starts inviting her to his room for a beer. Eventually, she just gets up and goes to her room at 11 p.m. But this man, he had effectively harassed her for like 2 entire hours. I thought that that was everything, but then she tells me that she sent the guy's picture to her mum, who then sent his picture to everyone she knows, because she's from the town that he was previously living in. And it turned out that he had been stalking Tracy's aunt for an entire year, and that he's banned from the bar that she works at because he goes there and threatens to kidnap her. She literally has to be escorted out, not only by workers, but the customers escort her to her car sometimes. So, obviously we tell our landlord. Luckily our lease hadn't been finalized yet, so he agreed to kick him out. I call my mum to come over and Tracy calls her brother for backup, just in case things go south. Our landlord shows up and essentially tells him that he needs to leave and doesn't let the new guy get a word in. The new guy starts getting agitated though, and then aggressive, so we called the cops and several officers showed up, told the guy that he had no legal standing as there was no lease. He introduced himself to us with a fake name, obviously, and he hadn't been there for a full 24 hours and that he had to get out. The guy had to beg his sister to pick him up, and she was so unwilling to do it that she didn't agree until he offered to pay her $200. Mind you, it's only a 20-minute ride to where he was going. He left most of his stuff on our porch. When we went into his room, it smelled like cigarette smoke and there was an empty pack on the floor, including not 1 or 2, but 7 empty Dr. Pepper cans and garbage and crusty socks everywhere. The entire situation had me so stressed out that I didn't even notice that he had also left a pair of shorts that he had peed in the middle of the house's main hallway, and that was also the first thing you see when you walk into the house. They were there for the entire day, allegedly, even when he knew that the landlord was coming. They were still sitting there when he left as well, and I picked them up with a glove and put them on the porch for him to retrieve at some point. But who knows if or when he will retrieve his things, because he came back earlier, touched his things like he was going to take them, and then just immediately left. All I have to say after all of this is that I'm really relieved that we caught this before the lease was finalized, because this easily could have turned into a situation where me and Tracy had been sexually assaulted, or perhaps even worse. I've only told a few people about this incident that took place in the late 80s. I'm not looking for an explanation, nor can I offer any proof. I just want to share what my friend and I experienced in the autumn of 1987. So I grew up in one of the northernmost states in New England, about 2 hours away from the White Mountains and 45 minutes from our state's meager coastline, in a small working-class city. General Electric and a tannery were 2 of the largest employers. I think it was early October. The leaves started to change, but still on the trees. Local fairs underway, and cool enough to rock my HS varsity jacket. I worked full-time and was saving up for my first car, a 76 two-door Chevy Nova festooned with a Pink Floyd tapestry to cover the huge tear in the back seat. My friend, Joe, and I worked in the same restaurant, and an older cook would buy us hard-earned libations and give us a ride home. Really, he would just drop us off at a cemetery that was midway point between our 2 houses, and a great place for underage drinking. We were dropped off there with a 4-pack of Bartles and James wine coolers to split between us. It's an old large cemetery with rolling hills, moss-covered headstones, and large maple trees too. I grew up playing hide-and-seek and having BB gun wars there, in fact. I even taught an army buddy how to drive stick in that cemetery. It was never a scary or haunted place to me at all. Even after the weirdest experience of my young life took place there, I still thought of it fondly. Now, there was a gazebo where we would sit and drink beers, wine coolers. It was open-aired with half walls and benches to sit on while we chatted and drank. All we had between us was that 1 4-pack, so we were not drunk or under the influence of anything else. But we began hearing footsteps coming in our direction. They sounded like somebody was walking on leaves. It later occurred to me that that was the first thing that was odd, as the leaves were still on the trees and the cemetery was pretty well maintained. "Cops," Joe hissed, and I answered, "Kids." The footsteps, they came closer. We couched below the half-wall facing each other, the smiles on our faces growing more and more nervous until they disappeared altogether. The footsteps came at a measured pace. No other sound accompanied them, no jingling of keys, no fabric brushing against each other, and there was also no beam of a flashlight flitting about. The footsteps kept coming though. I could see my mounting fear echoed in Joe's face, but before we crouched down, we tried to see who was walking toward us, and we really couldn't. But that was to be expected, to be honest. It was a moonless night with little ambient light available. With our eyes wide and mouths agape, the footsteps came all the way up to the other side of that half wall and stopped. Joe visibly sagged, and I began to shake as neither one of us had the courage to look up at what had to be surely someone peering down at us. The footsteps, they then began to recede, and we popped up immediately to see who it was. And when we did, there was nobody there. Literally nobody. I mean, we could hear or sort of see where the footsteps were coming from, but there just wasn't anybody making them. It was dark, but it wasn't pitch black, and we surely would have seen someone there. We definitely would have at least seen the silhouette of a person out there. Ducking behind tombstones, we followed the steps a little ways down the hill until they stopped. And at that, we took that as our cue to leave, and we both sprinted home. The next day at school, we allowed that it was weird, and, well, that was that. We didn't tell anyone, and we just sort of went on with our lives. Like I said, we weren't drunk or stoned. Neither of us have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and being outside like that, I seriously doubt it was a carbon monoxide problem. Really, I just have no explanation for this, and I don't expect anyone else to either. The 80s were a magical time, and I guess some days they just contained a little more magic than others. When I was in primary school, we used to go on school trips to a place called Marchant's Hill in Surrey, UK. Marchant's Hill is an adventure centre that mainly caters to schools. They have activities like climbing, orienteering, canoeing, etc., and they had dorms to stay in as well. We usually went for like 4 or 5 days. The place sits on 45 acres of land, and there's really no reason to be there other than the above. I believe they also have a part for adults for team building trips and stuff like that, but they're certainly not together, so we'd only ever see employees or sometimes kids from a different school while there. Now, one evening, we were camping out for the night. A Marchant's Hill employee led us to the camping area at about 7 p.m, helped show us all how to set up our tents, and start a fire, and then left for the night, leaving us in the care of 2 of our teachers from school. We had a fire going, and we're all sitting around it on logs that were placed around the fire area. We were singing songs and talking and just being kids as it got darker. After a while, a couple of us heard the sound of somebody approaching, but I didn't think too much of it. Probably just an employee checking in. Suddenly, though, this guy appears out of the darkness and loudly says, "You shouldn't be here." Everyone whips their head around to see who it was, and this guy was just sort of standing there. He's a big guy, looked homeless in that he had a big scraggly beard and hair, but he's wearing a suit with Wellington boots and is holding a plastic bag. One of our teachers says to the guy, "It's okay, we're booked in for a few days. We're from this school." The guy looks around for a few seconds, like he's checking behind himself, and then repeats, "You shouldn't be here," but louder. The male teacher that was with us jumps up and positions himself between the guy and us kids very quickly, and repeats that we are supposed to be here, and asks the man who he is, while at the same time grabbing him by the arm to sort of lead him away. The strange guy pulls his arm away aggressively, then walks off real quickly without saying another word though. A bit later, all of the kids are in their tents, 2 to a tent. The teachers are still sat outside, probably enjoying some child free time, when we hear some shouting, and it sounded to me like, "Go, go, get out." A few of us opened our tents, and I could just about see the same guy standing there in the darkness. Our teacher is already right by the guy at that point, and shouts at him to leave, but the guy is just sort of looking at him, so the teacher starts to gently push him back away from us, and is saying something to the guy while doing so. They disappear into the darkness of the surrounding area for maybe 30 seconds. Then my teacher comes back and, with a look of urgency, says, "We're going back to the dorms right now." No idea what was said, but my teacher's whole demeanor had changed suddenly. We all leave our tents pitched and we walk the 10 minutes or so back to the dorms by torchlight. Once we're in the dorm, the teachers go off to speak to an employee, and about 15 minutes later, we see a police car pull up by the reception area, and the police talk to my teacher. That guy had absolutely no reason to be on that 45 acres of land. Looking back, he probably had mental health issues, but man did he scare us. And thinking back on it all, it still makes me feel a little bit uneasy. This happened a few years ago, so some details may not be the clearest in my head, but I'll try to recall this event in its fullest form. So first, let me set up the layout of where it happened. My upstairs hallway has 5 rooms connected to it. In order from the stairs, it goes my sister's room, the bathroom, the office, master bedroom, and then my room at the very end. The stairs lead down to the kitchen and share a wall with a bathroom, so you can hear anyone on the stairs quite easily. In addition to this, it's not a new house, so you can hear pretty much everything because thin walls, loud floors, and doors and all that. Now, what happened one night was that I had woken up at around midnight or 1 a.m. because I needed to go to the bathroom at some point. But with the standard amount of grumbling because I didn't want to leave the warmth of my bed, I got up and walked down the hallway to the bathroom. Everything was perfectly normal until I went to go and wash my hands. A sound on the stairs made me pause because it didn't sound like one of the cats. They're fat and old and have a very distinct way of going up and down the stairs. I listened though as quick, light footsteps ran up the stairs and around the corner to come down the hallway. They ran up and down the hallway twice before stopping in front of the bathroom door, which I couldn't have been more than 3 feet away from. They breathed loudly, in and out a few times. Then they ran back down the hall and down the steps into the kitchen where they stopped making noise. I would have been able to hear them if they continued. I was rightly freaked out because the sounds that I had heard were very clearly made from a little kid, of which there were none in my house. The footsteps were too close together, light, and way too quick to be anyone in the house messing with me. In order to move that fast, anyone who lived there would have had to have made at least twice as much noise, and the only one capable of running as fast as what I'd heard would have been my sister. But again, she couldn't have done it that quietly. I ended up waiting for about 2 hours in that bathroom before finally coming back out and booking it to my room. Any perpetrators would have been hurt if they had tried to return to their room or if they were anywhere awake because our house is very quiet at night. But I heard nothing after that night. No footsteps, no breathing, no activity. The next morning too, I asked each of my family members individually and separately, so they couldn't talk to each other between my interrogations, if they had gotten up at all last night, or if they had heard anything last night too. None of them are good liars, and I know when they're telling the truth, so when they all said that they slept through the night, genuinely, I believe them. So we moved into this house 5.5 years ago. I'd never experienced anything paranormal before. Honestly, I was a hardcore skeptic. It was around 18 months later that I began to experience disturbing paranormal events I cannot explain, no matter how much science I read. Note too, I do not have a history of hallucinations or schizophrenia or anything. I wasn't smoking weed at the time, nor on any other drugs. I was also in my mid-20s at the time. The first incident was on a November night at about 10:50 p.m. Almost all events happened between 10:51 to 2 a.m., but primarily between 11 to 1. For some context, I'd spent the last hour playing Among Us and studying from a Spanish textbook. I would listen to relaxing jazz sometimes and drink some Jack Daniels. I wasn't drunk by any means, but I went to pee. My mind was focused on how clever, funny the games were and how I couldn't wait to get back to what I was doing. And when I pulled my trousers up, a noise caught my attention. It was an Alberta Balsam shampoo bottle, about 1/3 or just under full, between the taps on the sink. It is a standard British porcelain sink close to the toilet, but to touch the bottle, I would need to extend my arm, bending my elbow, and that night there was no one nowhere near close enough for contact. But the bottle, it rocked far to the left, to the right, unnaturally, and repeated this motion about 5 times before it came to a standstill in its original position. It wasn't a small wobble by any means, too. It was a slow, intentional rock side to side. The bottle should not have been able to rock so far for either side either without falling over. But my bathroom is tiny. I couldn't touch the bottle, let alone cause it to rock the way that it did. The window was closed, so there was no breeze and anybody else in the room. I tried to replicate it another time by blowing hard on the bottle, flapping my arms and holding myself in the same position as when it happened, but I couldn't touch or move the bottle at all. Even with the generous leeway, I couldn't touch that bottle, and in short, it wasn't me, and genuinely, it ruined my night because this incident absolutely terrified me. A couple of days later, I was in the same bathroom, washing my hands at about the same time at night, when I experienced a sudden and intense sensation that something sinister was behind me and staring at me. I looked up at the mirror and couldn't see anything behind me, but I just felt like something was there. I was too afraid to move. I finished washing my hands after a minute or so, and when the feeling began to fade, I quickly left the bathroom. But this became a regular occurrence. Particularly in the kitchen and the bathroom, I felt something there, or that something was watching me, and sort of attempting to interact with me too. The presence was somewhat imposing and dark. I could never see it, but I just felt like it was there. My partner didn't believe me when I told him about these incidents, and would go to bed before me, so he never witnessed them at first. I believe this presence was a man, and for a while thought that it might have been the deceased elderly man who used to live here. He was placed in a care home aged 95, and was known as a nasty, horrible old man. The man passed away at some point. I'm not sure when, but it was either during the incidents or towards the end of them. Additionally, we had a living room carpet, and as these incidents increased in frequency, I began to hear something plucking at the carpet in the corner by the door. When I moved the curtain, there was nothing ever there, and the noise always stopped. But this is where my partner comes in, because he stayed up later occasionally, and he heard the noise too. Mind you, I didn't prompt him. I heard it and remained quiet until he picked up on it, and I told him that that was the noise that I was hearing. He went to investigate, and he couldn't see anything, and this is what made him suspicious too. Now, we have a rabbit, but we checked on him. He was in his cage eating in the next room while the noises happened, and unless he could teleport, pluck the carpet before our eyes while invisible, and teleport back into his cage, then it definitely wasn't him. Since then, I lifted the floor to see if anything could have plucked the carpet from beneath the floorboards, but the floorboards are locked tight, and honestly it would have been impossible to touch the underside of the carpet or underlay or whatever. This may be my mind manifesting fear too, but I also began to have horrible dreams about an old man with beady, shiny black eyes, a partially bald head, and white hair in a forest. I recognized the layout from a forest far away in my hometown that I used to ride a horse in. These dreams were disturbing to say the least, and the men were not like ordinary people. I felt they were trying to toy with me before they killed me, and one night I woke up to feel someone standing over me. Another I woke up and briefly glimpsed black writing all over the wall on the landing, and when I blinked it vanished. I was honestly terrified and often felt something on the landing or in the room too. I had no history of sleep paralysis before moving to this house. My partner told me that he believed that whatever it was enjoyed scaring me and was feeding on my fear. I tried after this to not to be afraid and to confront it, which honestly worked to some degree in the end. But one of the worst incidents was when I knew the man was there. I felt him standing about 2 feet away from my computer chair. He liked to stand over me and sometimes breathe on me while I was gaming. I was playing World of Warcraft. I remember exactly what I was doing. I knew that he was trying to get my attention, and so I ignored him. I forced myself to calm down. Then he moved closer, and I heard a huff as though someone breathed heavily through their mouth, only inches from my ear. I took my headset off and looked around, but the presence had disappeared, probably into the kitchen. I felt like he wanted me to follow him, so I did. My attention was guided out of the window as though he was leading me there. I went to the window and looked out, and I swear to you that I saw a shape out there that looked like an adult male of about 6 feet wearing a grey hoodie and gloves standing near my back fence as though he had just climbed over. Could I have been mistaken? Yes, for sure, but I tried to run from the window and ended up in a freeze mode by the kitchen door, because for some reason, I just couldn't move. I tried so hard to get away because I thought this man was going to break into my house and attack me or something. I don't know where the man was, but after about 2 minutes, I finally made it into the living room. 2 more and I went back to check. The man and the real man were both gone. A strange part of me believed, though, that the man chased the real figure off. In fact, I felt as though he had tried to save me that night, and I guess I became more sympathetic to him. There was another incident, though, which could be explained otherwise, but my partner wasn't convinced. We had a small children's desk with 2 wooden chairs behind us. We stacked the chairs on the table while our daughter was upstairs. While we were on the computers, the chairs just suddenly came crashing to the floor. Mind you, they were not precariously stacked or anything. The doors were open and there was a bit of a breeze, but there's just no way the wind would have been able to knock over the small wooden chairs to the floor like that. This also happened in broad daylight in the late afternoon. Now, over time, this all began to fade. I feared the man less. I often felt his presence in the kitchen, standing far too close to me. One time, I even felt a sudden icy blow down the left side of my neck. Our house is cold and drafty, so although I convinced myself that it was him, it could have been something else, I admit. My nightmares, though, they began to disappear. I would hear him sometimes walking upstairs, and I sensed him go into my daughter's bedroom just to look at her. He never did anything in there, but my partner also experienced something going on in the house on several occasions, but he is still somewhat of a skeptic. Eventually, though, everything just stopped one day. But after the man disappeared, we had issues with, animal footsteps on the stairs, a scurrying. It was weird and creepy. It sort of sounded like a cat running up and down, I guess. The first time it happened, we couldn't see anything. The plucking noise continued, and it was around this time our house rabbit for some reason jumped out of his cage, and we had at least 2 to 3 incidences where he bolted up the stairs and went into our bedroom. He was running about, and this was really abnormal for him. Of course, we blamed him and locked his cage tightly so he couldn't escape, but the noise continued. My ex was also woken by the noise one night and investigated them, only to find the rabbit in his cage and the noises continuing. The noises and the incidences have stopped for quite some time now, thankfully. The house now feels at peace, but honestly, that was a deeply terrifying event that actually ruined my life and made me feel really unsafe in my own home at night. I'm still not completely sure what it was all about or what it all was, but that's why I'm here. What do you think that it could have been? This is the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. So a couple of years back, I matched with a girl on Tinder from the same city. She offered that I could come over and watch a movie at her place. Everything was going pretty well, until she put on the movie. It was weird. It was like I couldn't focus on the movie because it was in black and white. Who would put on a movie in black and white, right? And anyway, all I could do was think about how I was going to get her upstairs to her room so that we could hook up. I'm a terrible person, I know, but in any case, we were sitting on what I call an L couch in her living room, where we were watching this movie. The edge of the couch where I was sitting was in the corner of the room. Hard to explain, but basically where I was sitting was the corner of the room with only walls behind me. I was being quite patient and didn't push her too much, but there came a point where I had had enough and was about to ask her if we can go upstairs. But before I could even move my lips, someone or something yelled in my ear to get out. Genuinely, it sounded like a male and extremely sort of demonic. Before anyone questions my sanity too, or if I was under the influence or anything, both are out of the question. I've never had this happen to me, and I could feel the vibration on my eardrum from the voice, as if somebody had cupped their hands and yelled in your ear. Anyway, naturally when this happened, I got up and questioned everything. Did you hear that? Is there anyone else in the house? She claimed that she didn't hear anything and sort of smiled at me and played it off that I was just nervous. I was starting to get uncomfortable and I could feel the energy of the room shifting, and I was genuinely ready to leave without hooking up or anything until she asked me if I wanted to go upstairs. I was obviously still stunned and confused, and asked her straight up if she has ever encountered anything paranormal in this house. She said no, but then continued to tell me a really horrible story about how one of her cousins was murdered, chopped up, and pieces of her were sent to the family, or her house being one of them. And I mean, it's kind of wild, right? But still, that wouldn't explain the male voice that I heard because her cousin was allegedly a young female. Still a little scared and confused, I should have left, but she was pretty and now inviting me to go upstairs to her room. But this is where things get just really scary for me because I know myself and would never do this, but anyways, when we got to her room, she invited me to take a shower with her. At this point, I knew that we were going to hook up and was eager to get it over with and leave. Normally, I would have joined her in the shower, but for some reason I was still on edge and checking over my shoulder every second like a weirdo. I told her that I would wait on her bed for her. Now, I remember sitting on her bed and just sort of looking around the room, but the next thing that I know is that it's morning, which means that apparently I passed out on the bed before she even got back into the room. Obviously, that is very odd. I was waiting to hook up and leave, no intentions of sleeping over at all, and no drugs or alcohol involved whatsoever. I couldn't remember how I fell asleep, which to me is just incredible. When I woke up in the morning, she also acted like nothing had happened. She said that I was sleeping like a baby and she didn't want to wake me up. I don't know. I feel like whatever was there that night was protecting her, or didn't want me to have sex with her. It was so weird, and I would like to hear anyone's thoughts on what this could have been. This is the only time that something like this has ever happened to me, and like I said, I get it. It's a weird one. This happened in India in the mid-90s. I was staying in an average mid-budget hotel in Goa, India. I went out for the night, bumped into a couple of lads from Birmingham earlier in the night, and went back to my hotel about midnight. Now, next to my hotel was a small lean-to type food shack, for want of a better description. I called in for a last drink before bed, and I was surprised to see the two Birmingham chaps from earlier. "What brought you here?" I asked. The taxi driver recommended it to us," they said. Anyway, there was only the three of us in there, and Suddenly I was aware of another person on a table sat by himself who I hadn't seen come in. I introduced myself and asked him what his name was. "They call me the doctor," he replied. "Oh man, we've got some dodgy fantasist," I thought. "Go on then, indulge me. Why do they call you the doctor?" I asked. "Because I sort people out from bad trips," is what he said. Me being puzzled and looking around, couldn't see any beneficiary of his so-called special skills, so I asked him who he was sorting. He gestured at the waiter, a Jamaican man who had served us, and seemed pretty normal and healthy to me, really. So I thought that he was just some Walter Mitty sort of type character. But it didn't matter to me, as I was off to bed in a minute anyway. He then rolls a joint in front of me and invites me and the two Birmingham guys to take some. I think I've only tried once or twice in my life, so I decline. He's pretty persistent though, so I think, what the heck, what harm can 2 or 3 draws do to me anyway? I take about 3 draws, along with the 2 Birmingham lads who by this time are all sitting at the same table. And within about 60 seconds, my brain has gone to complete mush, and my eyes are spinning like saucers. My last abiding memory in the restaurant is this guy looking into my eyes, wagging his index finger at me and saying, "That's why they call me the doctor." My mind is absolutely gone. I don't know if I'm or the other 2 guys are being set up to be robbed or worse, and I realize that I've only got seconds to act. "I just gotta go for a pee," I managed to utter out before staggering out of the place, my legs like Bambi on ice and stumbling into my hotel just yards away. That night, I lay awake from midnight until 6 a.m., completely hallucinating. I've never taken anything before like acid or whatever, but that's what I imagined that it would be like. I never did meet the 2 Birmingham guys again, so I really don't know what transpired after I left. I do sometimes think about them, and I really do hope that they made it out okay. So I don't typically believe in this kind of stuff, but I had a strange encounter a while back that I was telling my coworker about, and they insisted that what I saw was a rake. I've been doing some research since I had no idea what it was, and I gotta say that it looks very similar to what I saw. So, I was driving home from work at like 1:30 in the morning, about 2 months ago, and was heading down this typically busy side street. Except since it was late, there wasn't a lot of traffic, just a Jeep in front of me. As I was driving around a bend in the road, I saw in my peripheral this figure to my right by the sidewalk, standing between 2 small trees, held up by wire supports. This creature was standing kind of behind them, I guess. At first I thought it was just a big slender dog, like a white greyhound or Great Dane that escaped and seemed to be standing and barking at traffic by the sidewalk. I only noticed it as I began to pass it, but as I passed it, I quickly noticed that it appeared to have a humanoid-shaped head with black eyes, a hunched-back posterior, and a long-stretched mouth like it was screaming. I was going maybe 45 miles per hour when I passed it, and it was dark out. I thought to myself, what was that? So I slowed down quickly to look back, and in my mirror, I saw the creature turn around and run towards a wooden fence. But as it ran, I saw just how tall and slender the creature was. It seemed pale with a sort of anorexic appearance. It moved strangely, and its leg joints were inverted and bent in the opposite direction. At that point, I was obviously seriously creeped out. The Jeep in front of me also slowed down, so I can only assume that they saw it too. We both kept driving as it was late and couldn't stop in the middle of the road, but that situation really made my skin crawl. I kept checking my mirrors for the rest of the drive home and debating if I should have called a non-emergency line to have an officer check it out. But I told myself that they would think that I'm just an idiot and that they wouldn't believe me. These days, every night when I take that road, I look around to see if I can spot it again. I really want to believe that it was just a dog, but I can't stop thinking about how strangely it moved with its backwards knees. I haven't talked about this much except to my coworker because, quite frankly, I know it sounds ridiculous. I'm just wondering, though, what the heck I actually saw, and if it's something that I should even be talking about, or if I should continue to pretend like I never saw anything and just move on with my life. It was a normal day, and I was playing with my dog outside, named Harley. She was an English bulldog that was as friendly could be. My aunt called me in for bed. I was sad because I was having fun with my dog playing tug-of-war, but I went inside and laid down on my bed. My uncle came to my room. He gave me a hug and he tucked me in. At least an hour later, I put the Goofy movie into my VHS player, and all of a sudden I had a really weird feeling. Not like I was being watched or like I was dreaming. It was a feeling of familiarity, like I was in the presence of somebody that I knew. I didn't feel scared. I looked up and there he was, at least 6'4" to 6'6", wearing a long trench coat that went all the way to the ground and a broad-brimmed hat. Whatever I was seeing was completely black, darker than the dark room that I was in, and completely featureless. When I saw it, I wasn't scared or paralyzed. I guess I was more curious, and I honestly felt safe and like it was friendly, so I said hello and snapped my fingers just to make sure that I was awake. I looked at him for at least 10 minutes before I waved at him. As soon as I wave at him, he's gone as fast as he had appeared. I lay in bed completely stunned by what the heck just happened. I went back to watching the Goofy movie and I had an entirely normal night after that. Nothing else was strange or out of the ordinary. The weirdest thing was that I wasn't scared by this shadow figure. Instead, I felt a strange sense of calmness and curiosity, as if I had encountered a long-lost friend. It was as if the presence of the shadow figure had somehow reassured me rather than instilling fear. I really have no idea what this thing was. It was very similar to the description of the Hat Man, but I could tell that I wasn't being threatened by this presence. The shadow figure seemed to be observing me from a distance almost as if it was studying my every move. The encounter with the shadow figure left me with a lingering sense of curiosity, and it's as if that brief interaction held a hidden meaning or purpose that I may never fully comprehend. Despite not seeing him again, the memory of that enigmatic presence continues to puzzle and fascinate me. In my job, I visit care homes for reviews with residents. I spend most of my day in and out of the places for at least a couple of hours at a time, to spending at least a day there at times as well. I've gotten pretty used to the routine now, but I have had one strange thing once before where my case died. I was in the care home the next week visiting another case. The staff said that the first man's buzzer hadn't stopped going off at night since he died. It had never malfunctioned until then. He was still empty. There's also a basement room in another home where I have to go to look at files and whatnot. And something happens in that room the moment that you enter. You become sleepy and lethargic, and when you leave, you wake back up again and go back to normal. Everything just feels very heavy, and it's not just me. I asked around the office, and other people have felt it too. Today at work, I was in a larger than usual home. I'm sat in the nurse station looking through files, and two people walk in. It was a woman and a man. I don't look up from my files, but I see them in my side vision, sort of. The woman is a staff nurse. She enters first, and the man follows her closely. She crosses the room behind me, reaches for the paperwork on one side of me. She then goes to the other side of me and sits down. As she sits down, I become very conscious that the man is on my first side where she's first retrieved her paperwork. He's still in my side vision. Big burly guy with brown hair and hands on his hips, wearing blue scrubs. He's facing at me, and the nurse and I can feel him staring down at me. I sort of instinctively feel like I'm squashed between two people. It's a small office, so you know when you don't get much personal space, how you sort of get an ick feeling. It was a bit like that. I look up to ask if he needs anything, and when I do, he's just gone. No one has left the room, mind you. There was no way that it was a person that walked away. He just disappeared in not even the blink of an eye as soon as I moved my head. Also, the blue scrubs, they aren't even any of the care home uniforms, but I guess that just didn't occur to me until, well, much later. The house that I would consider to be my childhood home is the one where I lived from age 3 to 20. But there are so many stories that I could tell from living in that house, but today I'll focus on two. One happened when I was about 7, and the other happened when I was around 13. When I was 7, I shared a room with my younger sister. We had a bunk bed and I was on the top bunk. We slept with our door open because both of us were scared of the dark and the lamp in the hall was always on. Now, I've always been a pretty light sleeper. If someone were walking down the hall, I would always wake up. And this particular night, I was sleeping with my back to the room. I remember being scared awake because I felt someone rub my back and pull the blanket up over my shoulders. I thought that it was odd because I hadn't woken up to my parents walking down the hall to my room. I brushed it off, kept my back to the room, and I just went back to sleep. The next morning, I asked my younger sister if Mum or Dad had come into the room last night, and she said that she didn't hear anyone. So, being the curious kid I am, I asked both my parents if they had come into my room at any point last night. They told me that they hadn't because they were feeling under the weather and went to bed not long after my sister and I laid down. I remember hearing them talking and their door opening and closing right after we laid down, in fact. So, after my investigation, I've decided that there was a ghost in that house that was watching after my sister and I. I may have woken up afraid because I was caught off guard, but I felt an overwhelming sense of peace immediately after the fear subsided. Maybe that's why I didn't bother turning around that night. Anyway, so at 13, it was very different though. I had graduated to having my own room and was no longer in a bunk. I slept with my door closed and also a bit heavier now. Still pretty light, but I didn't wake up every time someone opened a door in the house is what I'm getting at. It was around 2 a.m. and I woke up because I think I needed to pee really bad. I get up and walk to the door, but hesitate with opening it. There was just a sense of dread at what might be on the other side all of a sudden. Eventually, my bladder won that fight, as it normally does, and I open the door slowly. I peek out and don't see anything, so I run to the bathroom. After I finish, though, the same dreaded feeling happened when I went to open the bathroom door. Again, I peeked out to see nothing, and in the end, I just made a run for my room. I make it to my room and immediately jump under the blankets. I settle down after being panicked for a bit and roll over onto my stomach with my head facing the wall. I'm on the verge of sleeping now when I felt something whack my lower back like I've never experienced. Of course, my immediate reaction was to jump up and turn around to yell at my sister. She had gotten into the habit of pranking me by now. I turn, but I don't see anyone there. So I get out of bed and I check around to make sure that she wasn't hiding anywhere. Once I check the room and see that she's not anywhere in it, I suddenly become very scared. I run to the door and fling it open. The dread of staying in that room was just way more than that of the door from earlier. I go into my sister's room and, sure enough, she's passed out on her bed. I decide then that I'm sleeping in her room. Once I told her what happened, she rolls her eyes but lets me in bed with her. She just doesn't believe anything that doesn't personally happen to her. I didn't experience anything else that night, thankfully, but it was scary enough to remember it, even years later. Now, I'm really not sure if the same, whatever that was, is involved with both stories. I never experienced the tucking in again, but had plenty of times being scared. I wonder if we did something to make the ghost or whatever it was angry and it went from being kind to being threatening. I say we because my sister and I have some shared stories. Maybe there are two different things there and the scary one became the dominant one or something. I really can't say, and I wish I had more answers, but whatever the case, I was happy when we left that house.